gentlemen, attention please. The World Journalist Conference will be starting shortly at 2 p.m. Please be seated in front of the screen. The microphones of overseas participants will be off during the conference, so please press the unmute button before you speak. If you have any technical issues, please let us know through the WhatsApp group chat. If you have any questions or opinion to share during the discussion session, please leave your message through the Zoom chat. Ladies and gentlemen, at the International Convention Hall, the conference is about to begin. Please take your seat. To prevent the spread of the coronavirus, please wear your mask at all times inside the venue. We ask for your understanding that all speakers at the conference hall will wear masks to comply with the government COVID guidelines. Before the beginning of the conference, at 2 p.m., we are going to play a promotion video for the Seoul Tourism Organization. Enjoy the video.
서울관광재단 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매해 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추롱 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광 도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월, 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매해 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추롱 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광 도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월, 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단, 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월, 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단, 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월, 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다.
Ladies and gentlemen, attention please. The World Journalist Conference will be starting shortly at 2 p.m. Please be seated in front of the screen. The microphones of overseas participants will be off during the conference, so please press the unmute button before you speak. If you have any technical issues, please let us know through the WhatsApp group chat. If you have any questions or opinions to share during the discussion session, please leave your message through the Zoom chat. We ask for your understanding that all speakers at the conference hall will wear masks to comply with the government COVID guidelines. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the World Journalist Conference 2022. My name is Chong Digital Content Editor at the Korea Times, Head of the International Relations Department at the Journalist Association of Korea, and moderator of today's event. First of all, Mr. Kim Dong-hoon, President of Journalist Association of Korea and the host of the event, will give an opening address.
안녕하세요. 한국기자협회 회장 김동훈입니다. 2022년 세계기자대회를 위해 참석해 주신 각국 기자 동료 여러분 반갑습니다. 그리고 진심으로 환영합니다. 2년 남짓 전 세계적으로 지속되고 있는 코로나19 팬데믹 상황에서 온라인상으로나마 여러분들의 건강한 모습을 뵈니 기쁩니다. 한국기자협회는 1964년 창립되어 올해로 58주년을 맞이하는 대한민국 최대 규모의 기자단체로 전국 199개 언론사 11,000여 명의 회원들이 참여해서 활동하고 있습니다. 한국기자협회는 5대 강령 중 하나인 국제 언론인과의 유대를 강화하고 서로 돕는다는 강령에 따라 1966년 국제기자연맹 가입을 시작으로 국제기자사회에 적극적으로 참여해 왔습니다. 특히 지난 2013년부터 해마다 전 세계 언론인들을 한국으로 초청하는 세계기자대회가 어느덧 올해로 딱 10회째를 맞게 됐습니다. 세계기자대회는 첫 행사부터 2019년까지 7년 동안 전 세계 언론인들을 지구촌 유일의 분단 국가인 한반도로 초청해서 분단 현실을 직접 체험하고 평화의 중요성을 체감했습니다. 뿐만 아니라 저널리즘의 미래를 논하고 상호 친목의 장을 확장시키며 해를 거듭할수록 세계 언론인들의 최대 행사 중 하나로 정착되어 가고 있다고 자부합니다. 그러나 2020년 코로나19가 전 세계로 확산되면서 불가피하게 3년째 온라인상으로 행사를 진행하게 되었습니다. 한국의 아름다운 자연과 문화, 분단 현실을 직접 보여드리지 못해 아쉽지만 온라인 공간에서나마 서로 건강한 모습으로 만나 각국의 상황과 고민을 공유하고 언론 발전에 기여할 수 있는 기회가 마련된 것은 여간 다행스러운 일이 아닐 수 없습니다. 세계 언론인 여러분, 우리는 나라와 성별, 피부색, 이념은 달라도 한 가지 공통점이 있습니다. 바로 냉철한 이성과 따뜻한 가슴으로 진실을 알리고 자유와 평화를 위해 노력하는 저널리스트라는 사실입니다. 2022년 온라인에서 개최되는 세계기자대회는 첫날 언론의 팩트체크와 언론자율규제 기구를 주제로 토론하는 시간을 마련했습니다. 코로나 이후 언론 불신이 가속화되고 있는 상황에서 허위 정보의 근절을 위한 각국의 노력을 들어보고 저널리즘 구현을 위해 서로 도입 또는 보완할 수 있는 시간이 될 것으로 기대하고 있습니다. 그리고 둘째 날에는 각국의 우수한 언론 보도 사례를 통해 언론의 역할을 되짚어보기 위한 취지로 언론이 변화시킨 사회를 주제로 선정했습니다. 토론자들의 내용을 잘 들어보시고 도움이 될 만한 사례가 있다면 참가자들께서도 시도해 보시면 좋을 듯 합니다. 코로나19 팬데믹으로 모두가 힘든 시기에 비록 온라인상으로나마 소중한 기회가 마련된 만큼 이 자리에 모인 모두가 저널리스트로서의 소명을 다하고 인류에게 꿈과 희망을 제시할 수 있도록 많은 의견과 조언 기대합니다. 바쁘신 가운데 시간을 내어주신 만큼 참가자들 모두 뜻깊고 유익한 자리가 되길 기원하며 올해의 컨퍼런스 내용을 동료 기자들과 공유해서 언론에 대한 신뢰 회복에 함께 노력해 주시기를 부탁드립니다. 조속히 코로나19 상황이 종료되고 여러분 모두를 한국으로 초청해 한국의 아름다운 전통 문화와 평화를 사랑하는 한국인들의 모습을 보여드릴 수 있기를 희망합니다. 다시 만날 때까지 편안하고 건강하시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, President Kim. Next, Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum will give his congratulatory message.
존경하는 국내외 언론인 여러분 반갑습니다. 대한민국 국무총리 김부겸입니다. 한국기자협회가 주최하는 세계기자대회가 올해로 10번째를 맞았습니다. 세계기자대회는 해마다 우리 인류가 당면한 주제를 놓고 전 세계의 기자들이 참여해서 지혜를 모아왔습니다. 특히 지난 2년간 코로나19 위기 속에서는 세계 각국의 방역 체계와 경험을 공유하며 인류의 생명을 지키는 중요한 역할도 해왔습니다. 그동안 세계기자대회를 성공적으로 이끌어 오시고 올해도 변함없이 귀한 자리를 준비해 주신 한국기자협회 김동훈 회장님과 관계자 여러분께 큰 감사를 드립니다. 이번 컨퍼런스에서의 발표와 특강을 해주시는 서울대 언론정보연구소의 팩트체크 센터의 정을영 센터장님, 퍼블리시 권성민 대표님, 중앙대학교 이민규 교수님 감사합니다. 전 세계의 언론인 여러분, 인류가 코로나 팬데믹에 휩싸인 지도 2년이 넘었습니다. 대한민국은 오미크론의 고비를 넘어서 이제 차분히 일상 회복의 단계로 나아가고 있습니다. 국민들의 눈물겨운 협조 덕분에 세계에서 가장 높은 백신 접종률과 가장 낮은 치명률을 보이며 이 고비를 넘어가고 있습니다. 그러나 코로나가 가져온 상처는 실로 큽니다. 국가 간의, 계층 간의 갈등과 불평등은 더 깊어졌습니다. 가짜뉴스로 인해 언론에 대한 불신도 커졌습니다. 백신에 대한 터무니없는 허위 주장들이나 자극적인 내용들을 온라인 조회수를 올리기 위해서 앞다투어 보도하였고 혼란을 부추겨서 국민들을 불안하게 만들기도 했습니다. 결코 있어서는 안 될 일입니다. 과연 무엇이 공동체의 미래를 위해서 옳은 일인지, 또 언론이 어떤 역할을 해야 하는지 우리 모두가 함께 고민해 보아야 할 시점입니다. 지금 세계는 문명의 대전환기를 지나가고 있습니다. 이 대전환기에 닥쳐올 여러 도전을 이겨내려면 무엇보다도 언론이 바로 서서 길을 밝혀주어야 한다고 생각합니다. 세계적인 저널리스트 토머스 프리드먼은 앞으로 닥칠 가장 큰 도전의 요인은 소셜미디어를 통한 가짜뉴스에서 올 것이며 사람들이 서로 연결되고 서로를 보호하고 서로를 존중하는 건강한 공동체야말로 이 전환기에 변화를 이끌 수 있을 것이다 라고 말씀했습니다. 이 자리에 계신 언론인 여러분들께서 건강한 공동체를 만들어가는 길을 열어주시기 바랍니다. 연대와 협력의 정신으로 여러분의 지혜를 모아주십시오. 그 힘으로 언론과 우리 인류의 새 역사를 만들어 갑시다. 다시 한번 제10회 세계기자대회 개최를 축하드리며 내년 봄에는 세계 각국의 기자님들이 아름다운 대한민국의 봄을 직접 만나보시기를 기대합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Next, Mr. Kil Ki-yeon, President and CEO at the Seoul Tourism Organization, will give his congratulatory message.
Good afternoon. I am Ki-yeon Kil, the President and CEO of the Seoul Tourism Organization. I would like to extend my sincerest congratulations of the 10th World Journalist Conference. The World Journalist Conference not only promotes Korea to the world, but it is a place of the celebration where journalists from countries all around the world come together to have in-depth discussions on important global issues. I sincerely hope that this year's event will serve as an engaging platform for participating journalists where meanwhile discourse can actively take place while promoting quality development and a sustainable paradigm shift in the global journalism industry. Amid the gradual change from pandemic to endemic, tourism around the world has started to revive itself. And the Seoul Tourism Organization is in step with this transformation, ready in hand with the active implementation of various Seoul tourism promotions set for this year. I look forward to seeing everyone next year during the springtime here in Seoul. Thank you.
Thank you. Today's main topic is the role of journalism in the post-Covid era and tackling fake news. During the pandemic, reporters around the world have played an important role in global fight against the coronavirus. On the other hand, misinformation and disinformation created by both professional journalists and others confuse the public and seriously undermine the trust in the media. To restore that trust, much effort has been made. In Korea, for example, the Seoul National University Fact Check Center is one of the organizations that monitor the accuracy of media reports. Its director, Chong is one of the 30 speakers joining us today. The purpose of today's conference is to understand the challenges facing journalists in different countries. So please refrain from expressing political opinions. After the presentation session, we will have Q&A and discussion sessions. We will cover many topics today, so each speaker will have 4 minutes for the presentation. If you look at the screen, you can see how much time you have left. If it goes beyond that given time, I may have to stop you to move on to the next speaker. The presentation order is shown on the screen now, so please remember your presentation order. If you have any issues on your device or internet connection, we will go to the next speaker immediately and then invite you again as the last speaker. If you have any question about the presentations, please send us your question and name and to whom you want to ask that question. Now, let's begin with our first speaker, Ms. Nyong, Director at the Seoul National University Fact Check Center in Korea.
Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the current status of the fact-checking by global journalism and the operation of media self-regulatory organization. And my name is Nyong, Director of the SNU Fact Check Center. Since the 1990s, fact-checking was developed around the American media as it was primarily conducted to verify statements made by politicians. What it did was to simply inform the voters, he said this and she said that, which allowed reporters to retain their objectivity by distancing themselves from their own sources. It nevertheless left the voters to judge the validity and the veracity of the statements. Fact-checking journalism, a process in which journalists judge the validity of the statements of political figure by citing evidence, aims to deliver more relative and correct information to the people, and it is associated with the journalism reformation movement. After the early 2000s, fact-checking journalism rose beyond the newsrooms in America and spread across the globe. For example, the NGOs in the Balkan Peninsula and former Soviet Union states began to develop the reformer model, whose primary objective was in political reformation. In these regions, as shown by the current war in Ukraine, fact-checking against the hybrid threat of Russian political influence and misinformation targeting neighboring countries of Russia is thriving very much. In Western Europe, what we see is a group of independent, non-partisan fact-checkers that neither classify themselves as journalists nor social activists, and it's called the expert model. These fact-checkers not only fact-check the politicians, but also media outlets, and they have been actively developing automated fact-checking using computer algorithms. Fact-checking in South Korea is similar to that of America's newsroom model, in that it is the press that spearheaded the advance of fact-checking. And the fact-checking movement, which initially began as fact-checking political statements, is at a turning point at this post-truth era. Although fake news is as old as human history, contemporary fake news harbors 4 distinct traits. Number 1, the advancement of digital technology allowed posting fake news on websites and monetizing them through advertisements very easy. Second, the structure of social media is formed in a way that is suitable for proliferation of the fake news. Third, the reliability of mainstream news has been continually plunging around the world. Fourth, political polarization has exacerbated. In short, the reliability of the mainstream media declined and political polarization deepened, which has also led to a setting where misinformation can be mass-produced. These issues were clearly revealed during the COVID-19 pandemic. The realm of science and health became politicized, and false information spread beyond borders through social media. Fact-checking institutions across the globe united to respond against the global proliferation of misinformation. South Korean media has initially been fact-checking since the 19th presidential election in 2017. And that has been the case in this country. And it was done again since the 2017 in full swing. The SNU Fact Check, where I work as the director, is the first fact-checking platform in Korea provided by the SNU Institute of Communication Research, where 31 news agencies in South Korea form a coalition of fact-check statements made by politicians and government officials, as well as public issues that need to be verified. These issues range from social, economic, scientific, and political, and cross-checked and uploaded on SNU Fact Check platform. In the past 5 years since the March 2017, over 3,700 issues have been verified, and 62% of them have been confirmed as false. 31 media outlets have verified the accuracy of 520 cases regarding COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines in the past 2 years. During the past 5 years, we look at the trend. The source of the false information has moved from politicians and influential figures to internet communities and social media. That has been a shift that we have witnessed. Since the start of the pandemic, 69% of misinformation on COVID-19 spread through the internet, and 22% was done through the conventional media as a mistake. Some media outlets have had an active role in the circulation and proliferation of misinformation and disinformation by simply quoting and publishing them without verification. Last year, an amendment to the Act on Press Arbitration introducing punitive damages to falsified news reports were proposed, but it was since has been put on hold. We must consider whether to view the media as a source of production of the mis and disinformation or as a litmus test to examine and prevent the proliferation.
허위 정보를 법적으로 규제하는 것은 언론 자유, 표현 자유 위축의 위험성이 있습니다.
Regulating
법의 집행 주체가
mis and disinformation by law poses threats to the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press because the execution of the law is done by the very power that is under scrutiny of the press. We must not exclude the possibility of an attempt to limit the freedom of the press under the guise of legality. We need to have a model based on answerability of the media rather than liability, and is more appropriate for the self-correction process in which media actively communicates with the audience. The model can improve the quality of the journalism while also maintaining the freedom of the press and the freedom of expression. When the media spreads misinformation due to their compulsion to publish before anyone else, it is the responsibility of other media outlets to verify their peers. It is not enough that news outlets verify one another. What we need is an independent regulating body that must be set up to arbitrate. At the end of last year, researchers in South Korea proposed a formation of an integrated independent media self-regulation agency. According to the proposal, the key role of the regulating body is the assessing and combining of the complaints and reports of the users with the contents that it monitored so that the ombudsperson can quickly contact each news agencies to make amendments. The EU has been supporting the rise in quality journalism as a response to misinformation and disinformation. In the contemporary information environment where dis and misinformation is constantly produced, it may be a while until we as a society build up an immunity against misinformation, but it will prove to be a fundamental solution. the improvement of the quality of journalism through self-regulation, along with the disassociation from mis- and disinformation by the media through credible references, will be essential in rooting out the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Elira Kanga, Media Project Manager at OSCE in Albania.
Hello, good afternoon all. My name is Elira Kanga and I'm a journalist and media developer from Albania. I'm very honored to address and participate in this conference for the first time, and especially to discuss and share views with distinguished colleagues from all around the world. It's such a pleasure to be here, although online. And I'm actually joining you from Las Vegas, where I am at the moment. It's 10:30 p.m. here. As I mentioned, I come from Albania, and this is a very small country in Southeastern Europe, in a region which is famous for the old saying of Churchill, the Balkan produces much more history than it can consume. And yes, it also produces much more news and information that it can consume in a healthy way. In an era when we get bombarded by information coming from all platforms and all sides, it is very difficult to absorb all the news we are being thrown at. As journalists, we all have few principles which help us assess the information and do the right selection. Does this news have a source? Is it a reliable source? Does it have a time and a date? Why is this information published, and is there an agenda behind? All these questions help us sift the news, assess and evaluate them, and leave aside information which looks suspicious, is not reliable, or is driven by certain interests. But does the public has all these questions as a kind of factometer ready at any time? Does the public really have the tools to identify news and find out which is reliable and which is not? I think not, at least not at the extent we want to. Here comes the work of the fact checkers in every country all around the world. Verification of facts is not a new concept. This is what journalists do each day in their job. This is what they have done always in their pursuit to find the truth. Nothing new in that, but today we are in need for it more than ever, because information comes from different platforms in a different way, with an incredible speed that could have not been imagined before. If I have to bring here the experience of my country, Albania, into this table platform of discussion, I would say that I can recall fake news, disinformation, not verified information being thrown at the public. But more than that, I would recall also propaganda news, information which has a political or business agenda and is beautifully packed as news. Media has been polarized in Albania for a long time and has been following the divide between the two main political camps. But now we see much more propaganda, stories on successes of the government or initiatives put in a positive light, told by the government itself, more than independent, impartial news that serves the public interest. If we take, for example, the political campaigns, especially during the pandemic, when meetings of small groups of people were not allowed, the electoral campaign was transferred completely into the social media channels, with stories told only by political candidates and not by journalists. Albania, in fact, has a fact-checking service. It is called Faktoje and means facted. And I had the honor and pleasure to work in establishing this fact-checking service and contribute to its work 4 years ago. I'm still working together with Faktoje. It is doing a great job in terms of getting the information of public institutions or politicians, asking for facts, trying to get other perspectives. And yet institutions in my country take so much time to respond by not responding. Well, this is the culture of the society itself and takes time to change it towards transparency and accountability. But I believe this is really a public service for us all. In my view, what is really needed is media and information literacy for the public. Besides turning our attention to fact-checking, we also need to give the public the tools to understand the information, because we will never have enough fact-checkers to do the job on behalf of the public. That's why we need to teach the public to be able to differentiate facts or truth from misinformation, from propaganda, from conspiracy theories. Otherwise, we will see a very confused, skeptic, and disoriented public which might not be able to make the right decision for itself. Thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to our fruitful discussion during this conference.
Thank you very much. Up next, Mr. Habib Toumi, Media Advisor to Bahrain News Agency.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation. Fact-checking. Do we really need fact-checking? Yes, we do. The frightening erosion of democracy in recent years is deeply rooted in the lack of fact-checking. A few minutes ago, in his message to the conference, Prime Minister Kim highlighted the need for fact-checking for the sake of the future of our community and for the role journalism should play. Technology brings out the best and the worst in people. Smartphones have turned almost everyone into reporters with pictures and videos to make any journalist happy, as long as they are genuine. Next. They may be people reporting abuse, people seeking political gains, people seeking financial gains, social gains, personal gains, people targeting people they don't like, people having fun, candid camera style. Yet, most of these people do not have the mindset, training, or sense of responsibility of professional journalists. Nothing is off limits for them. Misleading people dangerously on wars and vaccinations, abusing communities, deceiving the media, for them, that's all fair game. Many journalists lost their jobs after they were tricked into publishing false information. Next. And even powerful leaders suffered because they underestimated the power of disinformation. To deal with this terrifying mess of manipulation, news companies, media activists, college students have set up fact-checking units. The aim is to make sure people receive information based on data and facts and not on allegations and speculations. Next. Fact-checkers are doing great work, but their task is not easy. It takes time to refute fabrications. And during that time, the misinformation, like a horrible virus, spreads fast and affects more people. Fact-checkers also have to deal with hardcore people who refuse to change their views, even when they are presented with solid facts. I'm sure you have seen such people during the COVID pandemic, or now during the war in Ukraine, the events in Pakistan, the elections in France and elsewhere. But fact-checking should not be given up. It should be reinforced, and we all should get involved, actively involved. Next. We at the Asia Journalists Association, AJA, strongly support a healthy information ecosystem. During our conversation last week, Mr. Lee Sang-ki, former AJA president, stressed that the role of AJA, with its vast network of journalists across Asia and well beyond, will become more important in cross-checking claims and verifying reports. We need to work together, and we need to do it now to make sure our world does not slide deeper into tragedies. In January, a young student with big dreams killed herself after fake nasty pictures of her were posted on social media in an awful act of revenge by a man after she refused to go out with him. She was only 17, and her family, who was too ashamed to stand by her, did not have access to fact-checking. She was not the first victim, nor will she be the last. How many more lives will be lost? How many more communities will be attacked? How many more races will be abused if we don't come together to write a brighter and more sensible future for our world? Next. The rule for survival is very simple. If you don't fight, you lose. In his keynote speech at the Asia 10th Anniversary Forum in February, Mr. Ban Ki-moon warned that there's only one Earth, and if people don't come together to protect it from climate change and other disasters, we will all be doomed because there's no other option. There's no other Earth. Today, I paraphrase Mr. Ban Ki-moon. If we don't work together to protect our world from the tsunami of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, manipulations, fabrications, speculations, and allegations, we'll all be doomed because there's no other option. We have nowhere else to live, nowhere else to hide. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Mohammed Tawfiq Ali, former senior reporter at the Daily Star in Bangladesh.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for having me. Dear colleagues, we're being set in an era of information revolution at the finger's end on the worldwide virtual space, must be cautious against being manipulated and against unwittingly amplifying the misinformation. So, before any information goes viral, we must be cautious that fact-checking is vital. Whereas this revolution, information revolution, tremendously enables people's empowerment and well-being, it may go wildly hazardous if not dealt carefully, if manipulated to the end of harming the human societies and social cohesion. Because bad information ruin lives, ignite hatred, damage public health, and cripple democracy, lead to confusion, indecision, wrong decision, and corrode public trust in professional journalistic work. And in the same line, novelist Elira considers all information guilty until proven innocent. Therefore, transparency, accountability, for the sake of transparency, accountability of the professionals, and ultimately the accuracy of any information are the key words in the current fact-checking regime. With the overwhelming proliferation of digital technology, it requires only a few simple keystrokes for billions of people to access an ocean of information in an instant. And that is where fact-checking has become inevitable more than any time before. In our day-to-day professional business, we need a standard fact-checking mindset and institutions in place to prevent information disorders that get currency in the form of fake news, rumors, and hoax. Let's have a look at what Mr. Tedros, the Director General of WHO, said in regard of false and inaccurate information in February 2020 at the Munich Security Conference. We are not just fighting an epidemic.
There seemed to be an internet
connection.
We are
fighting an infodemic. Misinformation. And prevent professionalization of disinformation. Accurate information contributes to healthy social order, while information disorder fuels havoc every way possible. There are actors against engaging in manipulation of digital media platforms to spread false and misleading information to serve the ends of personal, political, and coterie interests. They weaponize disinformation and misinformation. Fact-checking in the way of investigating and offering the reliable facts in greater and collective public interest plays the pivotal role in exposing misinformation, in getting the facts right, debunking myths, the false news, questioning the claims by public figures. Actions and decisions on false information can easily lead to unintended consequences. Fake news could erode professional credibility of journalism, which is public trust, on which the very profession is supposed to thrive. So what do you do? How do we fact check? We investigate a claim, we research the background and context, we evaluate the claim with data support or refutation, we identify the false element in the claim, we determine finally how far the claim is accurate. According to the Poynter Institute, a study revealed that 80% of journalists have fallen for misinformation online. According to misinformation expert John Donwan, journalists and media outlets help amplify misinformation when they cover it and not careful. So fact-checking has grown dramatically in recent years, fueled by concerns about misleading information circulated on social media and by populist politicians promoting alternative facts, quote unquote, and denouncing anything they don't like as fake news, quote unquote. Global Fact is the world's largest annual fact-checking summit for everyone who stands for truth and transparency in journalism, including fact-checkers, journalists, technologists, policymakers, leaders, educators, and the public from more than 55 countries. In my own country, Bangladesh, the initiatives for fact-checking of information is not up to the mark yet, is not sufficient at all. Still, there are some initiatives, mostly on private initiatives, one being BD Fact Check, who are trying to find out the truth and keep a check on any information spread online. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Quinn Min Wu, editor-in-chief at Global Times in China.
Hear me? Okay, thank you. Fellow journalists, good morning or good afternoon. I'm from the Global Times, which is the only newspaper in China that publishes both Chinese and English editions. Today, I'm honored to be here. This is my second attendance at this annual event. The last time was in 2016, when media representatives from over 80 countries held face-to-face discussions and pondered on questions about peace and development. It was a memory engraved in the bright springtime, but this time around, we can only meet online. Such different formats further remind us of just how much the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the world. Today's talk's theme, fact-checking to provide accurate information to viewers and media self-regulation, is very meaningful. We also realize that it is our mission as media professionals to eliminate vice and exalt virtue and safeguard the spiritual home of mankind. Here, I'd like to share two stories. The first one is from what I witnessed in Wuhan 2 years ago, when the city was just lifted out from the lockdown. It is about Mr. Kang Suk, South Korea's Consul General to Wuhan. He arrived there on a charter plane in February 2020. At a time when the epidemic was very severe, the Chinese people was deeply impressed by his countermarch. At a press conference, he told us that during the epidemic, the peoples of the two countries felt for each other and put themselves in each other's shoes, demonstrating extraordinary friendship and enhancing the feelings between the two peoples. The second story is from today's Global Times. During last weekend, our journalist visited a residential community in Shanghai and interviewed the Korean resident Park Chung-ju, who was busy communicating the latest local anti-epidemic policies, answering questions and offering helps to Korean residents on WeChat all day amid the current city lockdown. He said that some Korean residents in Shanghai have experienced some pressures during the lockdown, but most of the Korean residents living there understand and respect the city's efforts in fighting against the pandemic. He told the Global Times that during last week, they helped a Korean food enterprise in Shanghai send free tofu products to all the residents. He's so glad to see their neighbors, both Korean and Chinese, who later shared the dishes they made with the tofu and expressed their thanks on social media. This kind of stories demonstrates a fact that the shining light of friendship, solidarity, and cooperation can dispel the haze of the pandemic. However, we also saw the struggle between justice and the evil. As we all know, for over 2 years, some American and Western politicians spared no efforts in smearing China through endless slandering and rumor mongering, even tried to control the work of tracing the origins of the virus through political manipulation. We should ask, why does the US repeatedly refuse to conduct an in-depth analysis of early cases in the US? Why has it refused to respond to the international community's responsible questions about its biological lab in Fort Detrick and its more than 300 biological bases overseas? As a media outlet that firmly defends fairness and justice, the Global Times has always been at the forefront in terms of seeking the truth. For instance, last July, based on the principle of fairness and justice, the Global Times launched a petition requesting a thorough investigation into the Fort Detrick base in the US. The petition received widespread responses from internet users, which further demonstrates that our pursuit of fairness and justice is what the people desire. It is clearly that the global fight against the COVID-19 is also a fight to protect international moral conscience. We media professionals should take the responsibility to firmly uphold international moral conscience. That's all for my speech. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Margaret O'Halvo, editor and senior journalist at Al Dia Noticias and SIR Radio in Colombia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's an honor to be here at this Congress and being an assistant to the JAK global event. My topic, global journalism and the operation of media self-regulatory organization. First of all, being a journalist is an honor and is one of the most important professions in the world. For the last 2 months, we are watching on TV and reading on newspapers about the war in Ukraine. We see correspondents covering the conflict. Those heroes must tell and show everyday dramatic stories, and they must always tell the truth. The way each journalist and each media outlet writes and narrates their stories requires clear editorial standards. There are style manuals with generalities for everyone and particularities according to each publishing media. Aspects such as handling of sources and codes of ethic since the last century and before were adopted to give an adequate framework to the way journalists communicate the news. There are for the journalist keys as simple as having several sources. Confront these sources, listen to different voices to give the audience an objective view. Don't forget that the source is vital. The facts are fundamental. The journalist must be a professional with knowledge, analytical skills, common sense, and must be a good writer and good storyteller. One source is not enough, and journalists should ask as much as possible. Fact-checking is a process that has existed since journalism was born. It is objective and it ensures that the information to be published or already published is correct and truthful. Fact-checking can be done in-house, but can also be done by a third party. It is an effective method of regulation and control. At the beginning of this millennium, organizations dedicated to external fact-checking appear in the United States, and these entities have proliferated over recent years in many other countries, most of them in Europe and Latin America. Fact-checking is a key methodology to deal with misinformation, errors, and manipulation of the information. It is important to distinguish and separate fact-checking from censorship. It's different. Journalists, editors, and directors must review and validate the information to be published. Self-regulation is valid. In times when the truth is questioned by day by day due to the proliferation of fake news, journalists have a serious commitment to always tell the truth based on investigations, interviews, data, and concrete facts. Journalists must use plain language. In Colombia, my country, large media like television, newspapers, radio, and online media, they have regulatory and apply regulatory controls, and the ethic codes and style books are serious media and are truthful. Well, just to finish, in April 2nd, 2017 was celebrated for the first time in the world, the International Fact Checker Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, let's hear from Mr. Flemming Itten, editor at Politiken in Denmark.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back and to join in with esteemed and valued colleagues from many countries and several continents. It's early morning here in Copenhagen. It's a voice from the old world, as we used to say. And I've headlined my presentation in the following way. If journalists do not regulate social media, governments will do it for them. In other words, if you're not proactive in regulating towards fake news and other phenomena, somebody very powerful will come after you. And I will bring forward to you a couple of examples, which are both quite recent. One from the European Commission in Brussels, and the other from United Kingdom. And as you very well know, the UK is no longer a member of the European Union, so they can walk their own path in pursuing media policies and setting the frame for the freedom of journalists. Last month, the British government claimed to present an online safety law. And the words that came out of London was that this was a world first. The law is called the Online Safety Bill. And according to the government's presentation, it is a milestone in the fight for a new digital age to be safer for users and holding social media giants to account. And if this legislation is implemented, the government of United Kingdom will have the power to put heavy fines on companies which are failing to comply with the laws. Up to 10% of the company's annual global turnover can be fined. And of course, the law will also force them to improve their practices. That came out about a month ago. Within the very same week, European lawmakers in Brussels presented a deal on new rules to curb the tech giants, the social media giants' business practices in Europe. The new rules and regulations, if implemented, will mean that Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft may have to change their core business practices in Europe. The EU's antitrust chief, the Danish, my country, the Danish Vice President of the Commission, Margrethe Vestager, has designed this package of laws called the Digital Markets Act, which define rules for companies that control data and platform access. Under this act, the digital giants will have to make their messaging service transparent to the public and provide access to their data. That sounds, attractive to politicians and the many powerful opinion people in the public, but there are reasons to be cautious. Social media platforms will be, according to the EU initiative, will be legally required to prevent users from seeing both illegal content and legal but harmful content. I repeat that, legal but harmful content. What actually constitutes harmful content is likely to include content which might cause psychological harm, disinformation, or harassment. But it is not big tech social media that suffers when free speech is curtailed online. They have already demonstrated their indifference to free speech. They are only interested in making money. It is not Facebook, Twitter, or Google that produce the harmful content the government wants to eliminate or curtail. It is us, the users of social media, who are saying things that our political representatives would rather we did not say. The bill means, if implemented, that platforms, when confronted with content that might possibly edge to somewhere near the threshold or harmful, will censor it first and ask questions later. What to do? And this is my conclusion. In Denmark, we have a self-regulated media environment. Media corporations, unions, political parties have negotiated guidelines and regulations which are based on quality criteria, in particular in broadcasting. And this works to the great benefit of the audience we serve and has prevented us from getting what the EU is now coming up with and what we are already seeing being presented in the United Kingdom. Thank you so much. I look forward to the continued debate.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Tobias Kaiser, Die Welt EU correspondent from Germany.
Good afternoon to all participants, and thank you very much to the organizers for the good organization. My presentation is entitled Fact-Checking in the Times of War. The war in Ukraine has made the work of fact-checkers more relevant than ever. The importance of fact-checks in editorial offices has taken on a whole new meaning over the past couple of weeks. And this is true for media in Germany and all over Europe, as well for the whole world. In a war situation, just as in disasters, social media are an important source for editorial staff. There you can find up-to-date information, photos and videos, often before any professional reporter or photographer or cameraman is on the ground. At all times, however, journalists must treat information from social networks with great caution, as we all know. But in war times, this is truer than ever. After all, these channels are often used by interested parties for misinformation and propaganda. Even before the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, rumors and disinformation about the war were spreading on social networks. Since the invasion, these information and disinformation activities have only increased. Misleading reports about the situation on the ground or related issues are increasingly circulating on the internet. In some cases, there are justified doubts about the video and image material that is being circulated, but also the opposite can be true. In some cases, authentic recordings are also being questioned. Here are a few examples of misinformation around the war in Ukraine that fact-checkers in Germany and elsewhere have scrutinized over the past couple of weeks. Recently, one allegation spread on Facebook. According to the claim, the news channel CNN had tweeted about the destruction of a Ukrainian hotel. The authors claimed that CNN had passed off footage of a dilapidated Serbian hotel as footage from Ukraine. Fact-checkers got to work and found out the following. Yes, there were screenshots of a tweet that seemed to have been tweeted by CNN. It showed the picture of a partly destroyed hotel. Fact-checkers from the German organization Korrektiv found out that the picture showed indeed an abandoned Serbian hotel. They used a reverse Google picture search. Google identified the pictures as pictures of that Serbian hotel. And also a search on Google Maps led to similar pictures. So that part of the claim was right. The photo did indeed not show a bombed Ukrainian hotel, but an old Serbian hotel. But fact-checkers from USA Today and 3 US organizations that also followed up on the claim found out that CNN had never released such a tweet. Spokespersons from the channel said that the channel's official Twitter account had never published such a tweet. Thus, someone had fabricated a fake CNN tweet with obviously wrong information, supposedly to spread the screenshot on social media. In another case, a video of alleged body bags in Ukraine is circulating on the internet. In early March, the video went viral on social media, showing black bags lined up, reminiscent of body bags. In the foreground, a journalist wearing a mouth-nose protector is commenting on the scene. The sound is muted. While the journalist speaks in the camera, there's suddenly movement in one of the black bags. All this suggests that the alleged footage from Ukraine is proof of a staging. The reporter is reporting about deaths that did not happen. The video spread internationally. It was also shared in German-speaking countries. Different versions of the video are circulating on the internet. One of them is done in a sloppy way, and that helped the fact-checkers. In the footage, a name is recognizable in an overlay. With the help of a Google search fact-checker at the German organization, found out that it is the name of a reporter from an Austrian news channel. The authors of the clip used the name of the journalist and the name of the television in a Google search, and they did find a video on YouTube. The title of the video is Vienna Demonstration Against Climate Policy. The video was uploaded to the official account of the Osce news channel on February 4th, 2022, thus 3 weeks before the invasion of Ukraine. It shows the same scene that has gone viral on social media. And that is the crucial finding of the fact-checkers. The footage is not from a report in Ukraine, but rather it was taken at a climate protest in Vienna. These are just 2 examples of many. They show how pervasive disinformation can be, and that professional journalists need to be vigilant when they use information from social media. But these examples also show that newsroom staff don't need extraordinary expertise to detect disinformation. It takes only common sense and simple online tools like a Google search or Google Maps. That we have the tools for effective fact-checking at our fingertips, that is comforting news.
Presentation in 20 seconds.
Yes, thank you. And if we think about it, fact-checking has always been part of good journalism. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Nalima Marthur, trustee and trainer in foreign media in India. We can hear you. Would you press the unmute button?
Can you hear me now? Namaste.
Now we can.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be at the conference as always, and thank you very much for giving me the space and the honor. Today's subject is, of course, very fascinating, and we've already heard some wonderful opinions already from speakers before me. So verification has really been at the core of journalistic practice. It is fact-checking that has become wondrous. The world has tagged on to fact-checking that is more of a social phenomenon than a journalistic one. Citizens love to be up to date about everything. News that comes their way now often goes through the grind mill of fact-checking. You know, it's a kind of concept. Maybe I'll have something better and more enlightening to say at the party tonight. That is what pushes them. Inadvertently, fact-checking has become an industry as well. Data shows there has been a 3 to 4-fold increase in fact-checking organizations across the world. Studies are already analyzing their validity. What questions are asked and how, and its impact on the answers. This limits the usefulness for citizens to decide which version of disputed realities to believe in. The contention is that the social, cultural, political background and the context of a disputed fact can often be missing in the fact-checking process. News agencies, television channels, newspapers, they all started setting up their own fact-checking mechanisms years ago. They dealt with both the pre-publication fact-check and then post-publication fact-check arising due to consumers of the information. It was need-driven because doubts about verified facts and colored opinion had already set in deeply. It is here really noteworthy to recall an example. It's the curious story of a man called Stephen Glass, who worked for the New Republic and other weeklies. The New Republic is a reputed American magazine from the early 1900s. Glass began his career as a fact checker. Later, he invented, and I repeat, invented fictitious stories that he submitted as reportage. Fact checkers at the organizations never flagged these stories. Michael Kelly, who edited some of Stephen's stories, frankly blamed his own self, not the fact checkers. He said that any fact checking system is built on trust. If a reporter is willing to fake notes, it defeats the system. The real vetting system is not fact checking, but the editor. This brings us to the core. Citizen-driven fake news is like a rebound effect of public opinion to decades of manufactured content to influence public opinion. Whether it has been the perception of denial of full evidence, like in the case of the bourgeois of Collet sculptures, or demonization, like it was in the case of re-imaging of Trotsky to permanently distance him from the communist history of Russia. Then there is what is now called YCRT, W-Y-S-I-A-T-I. What you see is all there is. This is a theory of Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winner. YCRT is based on the premise that we tend not to look for what we do not see without being fully aware of what we do not know. This is a huge concept that goes beyond our commitment and dedication to good journalism. How many of us are trapped in the YCRT syndrome? And if we are, and the numbers are more than we would like to believe, are we, journalists, ready to change? If the answer is no, the cycle of fake or manufactured news, misinformation, agenda-driven fact-checking will spin reality beyond recognition. Fact-checking or self-regulation concepts have arisen because of personal biases and opinions in journalistic practice. It is a long path to again being true to ourselves and the facts around us. Objectivity, back to the basics in journalism, and leaving activism to activists. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you have any question to any of the speakers, please send us the question you have and to whom you want to ask that question. Also, please respect the time rule and finish your presentation in 4 minutes. Up next, we have Mr. Ranjit Kumar, Strategic Affairs Analyst at Rabivar in India. Yes, he's on now. Thank you. We are moving on to the next speaker. We will invite Mr. Kamor as the last speaker. Now, let's hear from Mr. Alezar Barmami, Editor-in-Chief at ISNA News Agency in Iran.
Okay, thank you. Hello. This is Elira Bahrami, and this is a part of my article in 4 minutes. In Iran, especially with the spread of social networks, one of the types of fake news that increased was the fake news of the death of prominent figures, especially for those who have a history of illness or old age. Such news was mostly spread during the Iranian New Year holidays that almost last 2 weeks. But some of the figures whose deaths have been reported over the past few years are still alive. Some Iranian media outlets feel victim to fake social media news. In my news agency, Isna, the strategy was chosen in this regard. Second source, it became more important than before. In Isna, after receiving the news of the death of famous or important people, this news is published only when a second source has confirmed it. The second source is in many cases a family member and sometimes a guild in which the artist is a member and is responsible for planning the funeral. Of course, in Isna, the old debate about the speed of the news or the accuracy, correctness of the news is also important. We believe that the speed of the news is very important, but accuracy is also more important than breathing. How is this question solved? This is the main point. Any known professional can speed up the spread of news. Any unskilled driver can drive a car at breakneck speed. But for a professional journalist, the speed of news coverage is a different matter. In fact, the speed of a skilled driver is resharing, the speed of a skilled driver is resharing. So it can be said that successful journalists are those who can mix emotion with experience. This is where threat becomes opportunity. Our time, as much of this news became known to be fake on social media, it became important to cite standard media. On virtual networks, when they publish the news, they try to remind that the news was also published by the official media. Sometimes in order for the audience to believe their news, they even lied that the news was published by a standard media. A number of fake news on Iranian social networks have been attributed to Isna, thought Isna had not published that news. This shows that the media which strengthened their professional behavior and did not lose their originality in imitating social networks are still considered a reliable source. Do not doubt that this situation will be more beneficial for the standard media in the future. The media should act like a waterproof clock, showing the exact time without increasing or decreasing the speed of its hands under the influence of external factors. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Ms. Puneh Nadai, Editor-in-Chief at Shokharan magazine in Iran. Hello, Ms. Nadai.
Hello, dear participants.
You may begin your presentation. We are having an internet connection problem, so we will invite you again as the last speaker. So we are moving on to the next speaker, Mr. Frank McNally, columnist at the Irish Times.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. When the Hollywood scriptwriter William Goldman sat down to write the screenplay for All the President's Men, based on the book by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, he was faced with a dilemma. By then, 1974, everyone knew how the story ended. The journalists won. The US president had been forced to resign. How could Goldman make drama out of that? He wrestled with the problem for weeks, then found the answer. In his own words, he would throw out the second half of the book. The film would instead concentrate on the first half, the journalist's struggle, and the movie's climax would be the journalist's biggest mistake. That happened when, because of a fact-checking mix-up, they prematurely named Howard Haldeman, White House Chief of Staff and the second most powerful man in America, as part of the conspiracy. Haldeman was indeed guilty, but under the Washington Post's own rules, the reporters needed two sources. They had only one. In their eagerness to get a second source among government insiders who were by then afraid to speak, Bernstein devised a complicated system in which he would count to 10 over the phone, and if the source didn't hang up until the end, it meant the story was true. In the event the caller took the instructions to mean the opposite, so the story ran and the source disowned it. That allowed the White House, which had been on the defensive for months, to launch a fierce counterattack, portraying the newspaper as reckless. The reporters were given a dressing down by their editor before being sent back to work and warned not to screw up again. And that is the climax of the film. In the low-key closing scene, set in a quiet newsroom, all the drama is provided by a typewriter at the bottom of the screen, wrapping out the dates and headlines of the journalist's subsequent triumph up to and including the headline, President Nixon resigns. If fact-checking could be confusing in the simpler world of 1974, how much more so is it today in an age of ubiquitous social media, when everybody is a publisher, when the truth is constantly contested, and when the information wars are a big part of war itself? Last month, one of my colleagues in the Irish Times, our European correspondent Naomi O'Leary, had a fraught experience of the new chaotic reality. It began when she reported that staff at the United Nations had been instructed on the subject of Ukraine to avoid the words war or invasion and use conflict or military offensive instead. There was nothing complicated about her sourcing. She had been leaked an email from the UN's Department of Global Communications, but an international incident followed. And as Ukraine expressed concern at the story, the UN mounted an all-out counterattack. Its official spokesperson's Twitter account quickly denounced our report as fake. Snopes.com, the self-declared definitive internet reference source, agreed, declaring it false. Many others in social media, ranging from named journalists to unnamed truth vigilantes, now took their cue from the UN and weighed in, dismissing the story or haranguing my colleague to withdraw it. Luckily for her, the official denials encouraged other UN staffers to send more details supporting the story. This suggested the email was not an isolated one, that there had been more general top-down pressure to soften the language around the invasion or not mention it at all. While our correspondent stuck to her story, meanwhile, the UN spokespeople changed theirs in installments. As Naomi has written, I was amazed how many people were dismissing my story based on a carefully worded denial by a spokesman who, if you listen closely, shifted from denying such an email was sent outright to denying that it was currently official policy, while then accepting it had been sent and minimizing it as the act of a rogue regional office. As for Snopes, which had not contacted her before ruling the story false, it has now declared the facts of the case to be mixed. It accepts that the UN's Department of Global Communications did indeed instruct staff to avoid the word war, exactly as the report said, but adds that the UN as an entity did not. If that sounds Jesuitical, it is at least preferable to the use of one of Donald Trump's favorite words to undermine a journalist. The UN spokesperson's tweet denouncing the report as fake has since been deleted. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Antonio Moscatello, a journalist at Asca News based in Italy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And we are living now in a dangerous time for journalists and for journalism. After 2 years of pandemic, a terrible war erupted in Ukraine. Many journalists risk their lives in a war zone, along with civilian populations. They are doing all the possible efforts to give us a reliable coverage of the events. but it is very hard to have a clear view from the field. In my experience of coverage of war zone, I had a feeling of discomfort and frustration. It was as I was embarked in a large ship, but I could watch just the panorama from the small porthole of my cabin. And this situation is not better from the offices in my own country. How can you fact check a large influx of information coming every day, every hour from many sources in a war zone? It's really an hard task, while readers are asking faster and faster informations. Moreover, in a war situation, the pressures from authorities in many countries become stronger. Sometimes it emerges a drive to censorship, but I think there is a third way between the unchecked news and censorship, and it is the correct one, the self-regulation of journalists. Self-regulation is not censorship, and not even self-censorship. It is about establishing good principles on ethics, accuracy, rights, while fully preserving the freedom on what to report, how to report, and what opinions to express. The self-regulation environment in my country, my own country, Italy, is very articulated. In Italy, there is an institution legally entrusted of the control of ethical standards of journalism. It is the National Order of Journalists, born in 1963. But to tell the truth, there was a National Guild of Journalists in the fascist era from 1925. The aim of this guild was very different, was censorship. Besides the order, we have an independent union, the National Federation of Italian Press. To be part of the national order, every professional journalist has to pass a national exam. The two institutions in 1993 adopted a Charter of Duties of Journalists, recalling the laws on press and Constitution of Italy. In the introduction of the Charter, there is the following statement: the respect of truth of facts is an unbreakable duty of all journalists. The relationship of trust between media outlets and the people is the foundation on every journalist's job. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Kanat Osce, Deputy Director at Media Holding in Kazakhstan.
Good morning, all participants of World Journalist Conference, dear Chairman. I would like to tell you about Kazakhstan's experience in combating fake information on the example of the website stopfake.kz. Fakes, trolls, haters, the drain of disinformation on social networks, terms that have relatively recently come into use, are already actively accompanying the information field of Kazakhstan. As we can see, this is a global trend. Many countries, including countries of advanced democracy, are taking measures to tighten the norms to combat fake news. The government of Kazakhstan continues to fight hard against fakes. There was an article of the Criminal Code, dissemination of deliberately false information. an article that appeared specifically to prevent fakes during emergencies. According to it, several people were brought to justice at that time. There are 2 articles in the Criminal Code of Kazakhstan, Article 1130 on libel and Article 2074 on the dissemination of deliberately false information. Both articles deals with fake information. Only the first one concerns those cases when the honor and dignity of a person is discredited. And the second one when there is a danger of disturbing public order. The first article provides for punishment in the form of a fine of 2,000 monthly calculation index or imprisonment for up to 2 years. In the case of libel with the accusation of person in the commission of grave and especially grave crimes, the penalty is a fine of 3,000 monthly calculation index or from 3 years of imprisonment. According to the Article 2074, there is also a gradation of punishment. The most severe is 7 years in prison for spreading deliberately false information by a criminal group during wartime or in a state of emergency. According to the founder of the site StopFakeKZ.kz, Alexander Danilov, in July 2020, the Stop Fake internet portal was created in order to stop the spread of false information in the Kazakhstani segment of the network, and in general to reduce the level of confusion and misconceptions, as well as to remind readers of the importance of critical thinking and explain how and why fakes are created. In total, about 2,000 fakes were refuted during the operation of the site. Most often, the site refuted fakes about vaccination against CVI, coronavirus, and pandemic, about chemical trails and conspiracy theories, fakes about 5G, internet technologies, and cellular communications. Also, during the January 2022 events in the Republic of Kazakhstan, fakes were refuted on the website, which were distributed in large numbers in the Kaznet. A lot of materials were devoted to the topic of internet fraud and phishing sites. To identify false information, the Stop Fake team monitors more than 900 sources on social networks, messengers, online and traditional media daily. To verify the information, open source
Mr.
search tools
please finish your presentation in 20 seconds.
Conclusions and recommendations. It's necessary to deal more systematically with fake information and pay special attention to media literacy training, the development of critical thinking for different categories of the population, from childhood to older people. Fakes and related phenomena have flooded the information space and are being used more and more often. Implement the experience of advanced countries in the field of media literacy and fact-checking. Use the power of large technology companies and the global social networks to combat fakes. Thank you for paying attention.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Kuban Tabaldiev, Director General at Khabar News Agency in Kyrgyzstan.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to see you again. This is my third participation in this such great conference. My report is dedicated to emergency and elimination of the fake information space. We are witnessing the rapid increase of the influence the media flow has on big politics. Until now, the common perceptions was that political players use media to their own advantage, especially aiming the flow of information in the direction they need. In other words, politics was primary and information sources followed in a given direction. This system was stable in giving certain results in favor of any given policies. However, over time, as people stepped into the so-called internet era, it becomes obvious that information flows had the ability to rise above politics. More stories began to be fabricated with their authors spreading their versions on events that were beneficial to them. This was the era of Web 1.0, associated with the growth of the internet's influence on all aspects of the within the global community. This went on for a dozen years, during which information technology progressed so far, the social networks emerged. There is no limit to the growth of these diverse platforms. We all remember well when Facebook appeared and initiated creation of the new information society. At first, not everyone understood the significance of this network, but gradually began to appreciate it until Facebook became one of the most important social and information platforms. The information flow on the platform has increased significantly when the functions of forming groups was introduced to the platform, which made it possible to multiply the audience of a single source. This led to the creation of countless groups united by different interests, social, economic, and of course, social, political. There are cases when Facebook groups have been used very effectively in elections process in certain countries at different levels. In particular, the example of Kyrgyzstan during the political events of 2020, when there was a change of power largely organized by Facebook, proves this well. Soon, similar platforms with various additional features began to appear and work in parallel with Facebook. China has launched many of its own platforms on the web. The most effective a new form of sharing information right now is TikTok, as you all know. The new possibilities of IT technologies will surely continue to create more new forms and solutions to distribute information to a very wide range of people. In these circumstances, it becomes almost impossible to track the authenticity of information, which has led to a lot of fake news. These stories can be divided in two types. The first type consists of unintentional fake stories when their authors spread them without realizing their unreliability. Therefore, the issue of media illiteracy among the young audience on the web is now becoming very urgent. It's more important than ever to educate them to distinguish truth or lies. The second type consists of purposefully created and deliberately distributed fake information. I will cut my present because it's going to take a long time. In general, we can conclude the time of irrelevance traditional media among the public and through them within big politics is unfortunately a thing of the past. Such traditional media outlets are themselves increasingly moving to social networks, thus also becoming active participants in the new trend and restrained spread of information. Now, the world community needs to encourage and educate people.
Mr. Tabaldiev, please finish your presentation in 20 seconds.
About the traditional values of media, it could be very difficult, but it must be done. Otherwise, we will find ourselves in a world with a completely unreliable fake information space. An educational society An educated society needs to be able to figure out where is the truth and where is the lie. Thank you very much, and sorry for being long.
Thank you very much. Up next, Mr. Chulumbator Dorgor, President at Asia Journalists Association Mongolia. After he introduces himself, his colleague will give a presentation on behalf of him.
자, 우리들 아주 스토치요 소송 스토치 하고 계신 스토치팅 아르함조스 한바발제 다가디.
It's a great pleasure to be honored to be here with you, colleagues from around the world. I would like to thank Journalists Association for organizing this important event. Okay, I will continue with the presentation now. Decline of press freedom and the rise of fact-checkers. In the past 5-year period, approximately 85% of the world's population experienced a decline in press freedom in their country. Mongolian standing in the World Press Freedom Index has also fallen. This crisis in journalism today, due to new laws and regulations restricting freedom of expression online, government have requested for content removal from major network platforms have increased in the last 5 years. Actions taken in response to the COVID-19 epidemic were commonly evoked to excuse press freedom breaches. Falling advertising sales as audiences and revenue continue to migrate online. Global newspaper advertising revenue has decreased by half, while Google and Meta now earn roughly half of all global digital advertising spending. This is especially acute problem for Mongolian publications. Against this backdrop, independent fact-checkers have sprung up in more than 102 nations throughout the globe in the last decade. Today's fact-checkers aim to identify, report misinformation or disinformation by verifying the accuracy, honesty of political claims. This sets them apart from the traditional component of journalistic process, carried out in newsrooms as quality control measure to ensure that content produced by journalists was accurate. Here in Mongolia, we have 2 active fact-checkers, Fact Check Mongolia and LiveTV.mn. Fact Check Mongolia is an independent and non-profit organization in Ulaanbaatar. It is founded by Open Society Foundation, the Mongolian News Media Council, and UNICEF. As for the other independent fact-checker, LiveTV.mn, it is also an independent organization run by journalists. As we see the number of independent fact-checkers increased, we are seeing some struggling relationship between media and independent fact-checkers, with increased number of complaints and objections from media about how fact-checking is conducted and how their information is removed from social media after fact-checkers have flagged it. However, there is work being done to strengthen the relationship between media outlets and independent fact-checkers. In several nations, fact-checkers are now accepted as members of press councils. This holds fact-checkers to the same ethical standards as journalists, ensuring that if a dispute arises, the press council will be able to resolve it. In addition, we must mention that UNESCO has also launched programs to support press and media councils in encouraging fact-checkers to follow media self-regulation as well as journalistic and professional norms. Many fact-checking organizations have their own code of ethics and practices. But reports have found that fact-checkers adhering to existing media self-regulation mechanisms at the national level is another way to strengthen cooperation between media and fact-checkers and facilitate any dispute. Studies have also identified that audience prefer rigorous forms of journalistic scrutiny, as news organizations themselves have begun to include more dedicated fact-checking services into their reporting to combat the daily flow of disinformation and misinformation without jeopardizing journalistic confidence. In Mongolia, in 2019, the Center for Investigative Journalists, in cooperation with Media Council of Mongolia, have launched a fact-check program to develop fact-checking skills of professional journalists. This has been a welcoming program among journalists in Mongolia. And we hope that this may build and increase the degree of trust in the news media. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next, let's hear from Mr. Vishnu Gautam, Chief Reporter at Rising Nepal.
Namaskar from Nepal. I will begin my presentation. Consumption of contaminated news and information is not good for the health of the readers, society, institution, democracy, and politicians. Contaminated information does not do good to anyone. Still, flow of contaminated news has been on the rise in recent years around the world, thanks to the people's growing access to information technology. As more people are connected to social media like Facebook and Twitter, fake news, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation reach them quickly. As many of the users of social media tend to believe everything they read or hear, they cannot distinguish between true and false information. Sometimes fake news story culminates in violence, as in Kathmandu in January 2000, when a false news story on the comment allegedly made by an Indian film star Hrithik Roshan on Nepalese street. 4 persons were killed in a riot sparked by the false news, and property worth millions of rupees was damaged in Kathmandu. This was the bitter experience we felt first because of the disinformation. However, back then, practice of fact-checking of any information did not exist, at least in Nepal. And the people who read or heard about the false news believe it. Even journalists tend to write and publish news without checking facts of the contents they collect from the government officials and others. But these days, 2 institutions are doing fact-checking of the news and information circulated in the print, electronic, and online media, as well as social sites. As a result, the people having access to the site of these fact-checking institutions could know whether the news stories they read were true or false. But only a few knew about these institutions and their works. In Nepal, fact-checking of information began only in 2015 by South Asian Check. Nepal Fact Check, the second institute, was launched in March 2019 with an editor and 2 researchers. Both of these are doing the fact-checking of the media contents and are promptly informing the readers whether the contents they read in newspapers, online media, social sites, and hear from the radio, TV, videos are true or false. In 15 months after its establishment, Nepal fact-checked over 7 million contents by June 2021 and found that 67% of the information were fake and 21% misleading. This data itself shows how common the fake or false news stories get published and spread in Nepal. It is human nature that many of us do not check whether the contents we read are true. We believe them and share, helping the spread of false news. Most of the misinformation gets spread through video sharing in Nepal. In Nepal, political ideologies and conspiracy theories help breed false news. South Asia Check in 2001 revealed how the cadres of the then ruling party CPN-UNL inserted an Indian flag in a photograph of a political rally organized by the rival faction of the party. When local media lacked contents, they used such false information, while those in the party disliked the rival group spread it. Fake news and misinformation also spread rapidly when the government of Nepal endorsed the US Grant Minimum Challenge Corporation in February this year. Proper audit system, human and technological competence are what required to filter the true and false news. But developing countries like Nepal are lacking these, and false news stories continue to spread, putting democracy and democratic institutions at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Keshav Prasad Padel, editor at News Spotlight in Nepal.
Good afternoon, everyone who are present in this August International Online Conference. It is so wonderful to be here with you, Hi, online. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude for the organizers allowing me to present my views on globally important issues like current status of fake news and self-regulations. Without taking more time, I read my presentation here. As journalists, we all are suffering from the fake news. It is infecting all our news organizations more dangerously than the COVID-19 pandemic. We have vaccine to control COVID-19 pandemic, but we have yet to one tool to contain fake news. One of the biggest assets of the journalist is how credible and truth story he or she should present to the public. Fake news is damaging our fundamental principle. If a journalist loses his or her credibility, he or she will lose everything. Thus, fact-checking has been traditionally viewed as a part of journalistic pursuit, performed within newsrooms as quality control mechanism. Fact-checking has always been the basic norms for news writing. News editors and media houses provide high priority for fact-checking and rechecking. News organizations used to have various steps, whether it is in print, broadcasting, or visual. Unlike in the old era of yellow journalism, fake news and disinformation are more destructive these days. Following the advent of social media and migration of public debate to online space, fact-checking also became the focus of independent organizations aiming to improve accountability related to claims on the veracity of information published in social media accounts for their claims. All journalists and media outlets are encouraging problems coming from fake news. Although many devices have been originated and fact-checking tools are in place, deep fakes are not going away anytime soon. It is safe to say that these elaborate forgeries will make verifying media harder, and these challenges would become more difficult over time. We have seen a rapid rise in fact-checking technology recently and organization as well. The advent of self-regulated media organizations are a good example. The question now is, are they going to keep going or are they plateauing? What is going to happen next? Despite the current uncertainty, newsrooms can and should follow the evolution of this threat by conducting research, partnering with academic institutions, and training their journalists on how to leverage new tools. The emergence of social media is a boon as well as a bane to the journalists and media houses around the world. These media helps traditional media to increase the reach of the news, videos, and images. By sharing in social media, the write-ups and videos and images can reach millions of audience and readers. This is the positive side of social media. However, social media also carries millions of fake news. If journalists fail to do proper fact-checking, they can land in controversy and all likely to legal action as well, like the country in Nepal. Globally, various self-regulated organizations have been in operation in regulate fake news. Besides non-profit making bodies, international organizations like Reporters Without Borders, News Lab, Newspapers One Unit, and UNICEF universities are also supporting journalists, providing fact-checking tools. Similarly, independent organizations like Journalists Federation, Reporters Club, and Editors Guild, which have statutory responsibility to regulate their own members, have been pressing through adoption and enforcement of rules of conduct for fair, ethical, and efficient practices in media. In some countries, government-created autonomous bodies like Press Council or Parliament-controlled press regulatory committees, which have been active to guide the journalists. Nepal has also passed laws and regulations forcing media to limit sharing the content of news and social media. These moves restrict the freedom of people and independent journalism. That we need to be careful in the name of fake news. Some governments are trying to impose laws, regulations to contain our freedom. As per news laws and regulation in Nepal, journalists are made legally accountable for sharing fake news for up to 10 years in prison or a huge fine. That should not happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Nasir Aizaz, Editor-in-Chief at Sind Courier in Pakistan.
Thank you very much, and hello to all the friends. After listening to all these speeches, I have come to the conclusion that the situation with regard to fake news, misinformation, disinformation, etc., is almost same everywhere around the world. And this is because I think we have failed to find any workable solution, as the issue has become complicated with emergence of social media a powerful weapon possessed by every citizen. Prior to advent of internet and social media, there used to be a fact-check system in print as well as in electronic media. As the print and electronic media were considered as gateway to information, and report filed by the reporters was to be checked thoroughly before publishing or telecasting or broadcasting. But social media smashed all such systems and turned to be an unguarded gateway from where any information passes without any hindrance, and nobody is able to verify whether it's fake or authentic. In most cases, the journalists greatly depend on such uncertain information. Now about Pakistan. Here, I must share that such a situation prevails in Pakistan. We have a grave situation because the rival political parties have started campaigns against each other recently. And with every passing day, we see that fake news are circulated, are flooded on the social media. The controversial, the previous government, which was recently removed by the opposition parties, had drafted a new law to set up Pakistan Media Regulatory Authority. The controversial law proposed placing all media, including print, broadcast, and social media, under the jurisdiction of one regulatory agency. Rejected by all the media owners and journalists bodies, as well as rights organizations, terming it as draconian and unconstitutional. The proposed law also envisages jail term for the journalists. In fact, digitalization not only has changed the way people communicate, it has transformed profoundly and irreversibly the nature of journalism and ethics. In my view, self-regulation can help preserve the independence of media and protect it from government interference. I must clarify that self-regulation is not censorship and not even self-censorship. It is about establishing a minimum principle on ethics, accuracy, and so on, while fully preserving editorial freedom on what to report and what opinions to express. Finally, a self-regulated media can fight more effectively for the repeal of unnecessary regulations by convincing the public that the media are conscious of the need for standards. I would suggest that we have to reset our mindset, because if you do not reset your mindset, you will continue to face such a situation we are facing today. I will agree to my friends from Bahrain, Mr. Habib, that fact checkers should be there within the country and also from outside the country in special cases. And also, I would say that proactive approach should be adopted, because once you fire a bullet, that bullet cannot come back. So we should be proactive. And I will give some examples that whenever general elections are held in Pakistan, the government invites foreign observers. So like that foreign observers, we should send fact checkers from outside to see in particular cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Gareth Kenneth, political editor at South Pacific Post in Papua New Guinea.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Papua New Guinea, a country in the Pacific. Papua New Guinea is one of the most difficult countries to be a journalist, to report from, because of the population and cultural diversity that we have here. We've got 1,000 tribes and more than 1,000 languages. So we have a democratic government system which has allowed a great deal of free speech, free information, but a big problem with dissemination of fake news and information. Now, with only 3 media organizations out of 8, there is only 2 government-owned, And the two daily papers, which one of them I work for, have a private ownership, but the one that I work for is, because it's global, we have a fact-checking criteria, fact-checking issues in the office as well too. Now, the new media technologies that has reached the country to ensure the cultural diversity in our media content and provide free space for public access and various opinions and ideas without ownership has also become so challenging for our country here in the Pacific, given 80% of the 10 million population that live in Papua New Guinea are rural based, and only 20% live in urban areas. So that's a very big diversity. For example, the current pandemic, COVID pandemic, with 10 million population, because of the fake information that we have, or the fake information being disseminated, we have only vaccinated 500,000, not even 500,000, but less than 500,000. And also the fake information is the cause of all the tribal fights that we have here because of socially related issues that we have. And now that we're going into elections, we're looking at a lot of tribal fights because of the fake information that candidates and political parties deal with, given the fact. But that is not to say that it is all gloom and doom. Our government has with the help of the World Health Organization, come up with a pandemic control center, where the police commissioner is actually the most powerful, who has come up with COVID measures as an example to control, giving out a cyber law that has stated that police can arrest people that are disseminating fake information around the country. Now, every organization in Papua New Guinea, including the company that I work for, also have a media law that regulates the production and use of media in the country, despite the fact that we are mostly rural based, which we apply to a wide variety of media types, including broadcast television and the internet. The print media, which is one of the most read in our country, encompasses all legal issues that may arise during the production or consumption of various forms of media in Papua New Guinea. So our individual and media, and we have a PNC Media Council, which regulates, distributes media ethics and promotes defends the values such as universal respect for life and rule of law and its legality. And this basically defines and deals with ethical questions about how media should use text and pictures provided by the citizens in Papua New Guinea. We have a major problem in there. Now, the biggest problem we have in the country is unsanctioned on social media fake news that sometimes the mainstream media buys into. For example, for the company I work for, because we are a global paper, we have strict regulations on such, and as social media increasingly rely on independent fact checkers to help them face their problems of disinformation. Although we don't have a fact checkers team, there is a standard operation in the company for all to seek to help users trust quality information. The relationship with traditional media becomes strained when fact checkers questions the work done by all the journalists in our country. So with a small country of a diverse culture, fact checking is a big criteria in running our mainstream news here in the country. But in our rural settings, where 80% of the population live, fake information, fake dissemination of information remains one of the major problems for us here in the Pacific. So as a newspaper, being a political head of the newspaper here, we are one of the big major newspapers circulating throughout the country of 10 million, which we have a very big issue with countering social fake media news and the mainstream media news. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to my presentation this afternoon. I'm going into an editorial conference for the newspaper tomorrow, so I'll be out in a few minutes.
Thank you. Up next, Ms. Rosaline Carganera from Asian Journalist Association Philippines.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me in sharing in this conference. I hope you can make contribution by answering the following question. Why is fact-checking important? Why should we self-regulate media? Then I will share some fact-checking initiative I came across the past few months. Then I will share my thoughts about the challenges of fact-checking social media and some of my reflection as a Filipino journalist. First, why is important to do fact-checking? Of course, a practicing journalist, I think it is important for us to be consistent. We must be truthful and accurate about what we write and what we present on air through radio or TV. Whether we are writing straight news, feature articles, or opinion piece, the content must be factual. It cannot be figments of our imagination. Even if it is an opinion piece, we must base our arguments on facts and not invented data. As journalists, our primary obligation is to send truth, and we must always observe the discipline of verification. Journalists who write or talk, spread misinformation and disinformation is very dangerous, sometimes even fatal, or for the vulnerable sectors and may put people at risk. It is good to remind that journalism is the first draft of history. If we spread lies, we are contributing to revising history or revisionism. Now in our country, in the Philippines, it's our election. There's a rampant fake news nowadays in the country just due to our election. They're creating a lot of fake news, especially in social media, to destroy the credibility of their opponent. Well, now, why should we self-regulate as media? As human, we do not have always the complete facts of the most complete picture. We have natural human limitations. We can see or we can hear everything. No matter how diligent we are with our research and validation, there is a chance that we may overlook something or someone. Also, as individual journalists and reporters, we are often informed by our own bias and subjectivity. Our minds have been shaped by our own learnings from school and from our interaction with our family and society. We have created opinion based on what we read and what we have experienced firsthand. We can always be objectively detached to what we report or write about. Finally, and this is the most dangerous reason for me, sometimes our corporate owners try to influence our work. Another reason it's important to self-regulate, even as we recognize that our media outfit must receive some of our income profit, but we must ensure that corporate motive to profit does not become the prime motivation in producing our content and responsible journalists. I have strong personal conviction that we as journalists must reject the regulation that come from states and the government, from the corporation that technically own our media outfits. Need to organization and financial management. But profits alone should not be the basis for our editorial decision. In terms of doing fact-checking, I believe in the beneficial to join the local fact-checking. We have a lot of credible groups and organizations conducting fact-checking in the country. So my lifelong lesson here has been there in no shortcut of being factual. Research will always work, and we must never get tired of doing verification until we are confident and actual and factual and near to the truth. Lastly, I think social media is both blessings and curse to our journalists. But that's another thing. That's another conference. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Leonidio Ferreira, Deputy Editor-in-Chief at Diário de Notícias in Portugal. We can hear Mr. Pereira, would you press the unmute button before you speak? We are having a problem with the connection or a mic, so we will invite you again as the last speaker. So we are moving on to the next speaker, Mr. Timur Shafir, Executive Secretary at Russian Union of Journalists.
Dear colleagues, I'm glad to meet you all today. Let's talk about the fact-checking factoids. So let's remind that in the modern era of war crisis, digital technologies and communications, the concept of the factoid is becoming more and more relevant. One of the meanings of this term is a fact that is fictional fact published in the media and received a live reaction from the audience. The influence of the factoids on the picture of the world and people's actions is increasing every day. If earlier days it was assumed that the media simply did not publish false or unverified information, then in the digital era, with an abundance of social networks, messengers and mobile applications that distribute a huge amount of data, the role of fact-checking is increasing. Now that the information is published by itself, the task of the media is to verify and refute it if it's necessary. Fact-checking is actually the term that has entered the vocabulary of most languages of the world. It means a set of principles, approaches, and techniques for checking and verifying the information, as all we know. The process of verifying the information published in the media has existed in traditional journalism for many years, for a long time. Now we see the situation that in the various departments of modern media, we have special groups of people dedicated to the work of the fact-checking. In addition to these fact-checking departments, which are the part of editorial media, special fact-checking resources in the format of individual projects are also actively developed in the world. For example, in Russia, we also have plenty of such number of such successful projects, the names of which I can share with the colleagues later. So nowadays, all these experts identify around 5 reliable ways to verify the accuracy of the information. First, what they suggest. First, look for the original source or confirmation of the information from several independent sources. Second, consider the opposite points of view on the event. Thirdly, learn to recognize fakes. Moreover, by fakes, the researchers means not only simulations, but also the negligence, typos, and technical errors, of course. Speaking about the fight against factoids, the journalist separately mentions that careful use of the information obtained from the social networks, as well as the fact that true fact is more important than sensationalism. Thus, it can be argued that spread of fake news in the modern media space has acquired a huge scope. Unreliable news plays an increasingly important role in shaping public attitudes so that the fight against the fakes and fact-checking come to the fore. Not only impartiality, accuracy, and objectivity of the published information depends on competently conducted fact-checking, but also the success of the publication, the reputation of the media, and the most important thing here is the trust of our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next, we have Mr. Kadar Al Ismail, Secretary of Information and Human Rights at National Union of Somali Journalists.
Thank you, and actually, for your excellent moderation. And actually, I would like to appreciate Journalists Association of Korea and great leadership for organizing this important forum. With growing multifaceted intervention in media and the rise of user-generated content via social media, it is becoming harder to distinguish between the fact and fiction. Digital news media is one of main challenges facing by journalists and media outlets globally. And many theorists hold that digital news media is alternative news source. But the question is how digital news media is reliable. Digital news media includes online journalism, blogging, digital photojournalism, citizen journalism, and social media platforms, which is very popular in Somalia and many other countries in the continent, are social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and others. This is what encourages more people to be citizen journalists on social media and makes it normal for everyone to post the information on social media users like Facebook, Twitter, or wherever they can reach to others with. This has led to increase of inaccurate information, misinformation, and spreading false information on social media platforms. Many people get confused by this issue because it is uncontrollable technology, which everyone is able to spread whatever he or she wants. Sometimes it is very difficult to ordinary people to understand who is a journalist and who is not. Because in social media, there are individuals who have a lot of followers on their users and acting as a journalist and spreading news on their social media users, but ethically are not acting as a journalist and violating rules and ethics of journalism. When crises, emergencies, elections, and other social conflicts arise, journalists need to be at forefront, making sure they provide accurate, accountable, and timely information to the public. During this period, are most needed to self-regulation by journalists and media outlets. As phenomenon of fake news becomes more widespread, it is essential for media professionals to have the right tool to avoid inaccurate information. Self-regulation is not censorship. It is about establishing minimum principles on ethics, accuracy, personal rights, and so on. I believe self-regulation can promote the quality of journalism and even media power. In conclusion, however, all above-mentioned challenges are there for media landscape in the world, but journalists and media outlets should double their efforts to inform the public and maintain the credibility and trust of media by audience. Finally, I would like again to praise Journalists Association of Korea for organizing this annual event, which can improve to enhance the communication between media professionals in the world and help make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Ms. J. Alex Turkina, former national president at Society of Professional Journalists in the United States of America.
Good day to you all, whatever time zone you're in. I'm speaking to you from New York, where it is presently just past 3 o'clock in the morning. As I was introduced, I'm Alex Turkina. I've been a journalist covering business and politics for more than 2 decades. And I am also the past national president of the Society of Professional Journalists. I want to take a moment to thank our host, the Journalists Association of Korea, for emphasizing the importance of media self-regulation. At the Society of Professional Journalists, our voluntary code of ethics has 4 pillars: seek truth and report it, minimize harm, act independently, and be accountable and transparent. Fact-checking, that is simply another way of saying seeking the truth, has always been at the heart of ethical reporting, and neither the times nor the tools of transmission have changed that. But fact-checking does not mean giving equal weight to multiple sides of a public debate. A popular metaphor is that of the weather forecaster. If one source says that it is raining outside and another says that it is sunny, the role of the weatherman isn't to give them both equal airtime because each side might have a point. His job is to look out the window to see if it's raining. And that is more or less the definition of fact-checking. The same is just as true for journalists. When we see it's not only raining outside, but in fact it's a massive hurricane, Our job isn't to repeat the press releases that tell us that everything is going according to plan. So we've been asked today to consider the structures that could be set up for an effective system designed to ban disinformation. First, such a thing is impossible. There are no structures that can ban disinformation, and banning certain information has a long history of warping facts into their own form of disinformation. In its ultimate form, this can lead to either official censorship of the news media or the self-censorship by journalists who are worried about falling afoul of the authorities. And I'm certain such an esteemed group of journalists can agree that the press freedom took a step backward when, for example, Novaya Gazeta, a newspaper run by a Nobel Peace Prize winner, suspended publication because of official warnings by the state. Now, while preparing for our conversation today, my mind kept turning back to a novel published in the wake of the Second World War, where the state motto was, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." And yes, that is from George Orwell's brilliant political satire in 1984. In that novel, demonstrates why it is so important for media to self-regulate in terms of ethical reporting and fact-checking. Our role as journalists is to be a critical counterweight to powerful political institutions, to be skeptical of every statement, to dig deeper, and to verify whether official information is inaccurate or incomplete. And it is organizations like the Journalists Association of Korea, the Society of Professional Journalists, and those that I know many of you belong to that should be giving this guidance on ethical and professional practices. I would like to take the final moments remaining to me to pay tribute to those journalists who have recently made the ultimate sacrifice for seeking the truth. And the list grows, so forgive me if I've forgotten anyone, but let's pause just one moment to remember our fallen colleagues. Yevgeny Sakun, Brent Creno, Pierre Zakshevska, Alexandra Kuvshinova, Oksana Balina, Mantas Kuverabachis, and Max Levin. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Dohoami Ng Nguyen, Deputy Head of International Desk at Vietnam Journalist Association.
Hello everyone, this is me from Vietnam Journalist Association. And I'd like to take the chance to thank the board of organization for inviting me the second time in the conference. And today I would like to share about the fact-checking and the transformation path of Vietnam media. The majority of new consumers see fake news as a big problem today due to its cognitive negative impact in society. Fact-checking is urgent requirement before spreading a news. So who will take responsibility? The reader, journalists, or the authorities? Fact-checking is one global response to countering fake news, which has been a multi-billion-dollar industry. More than 340 fact-checking outlets now operated worldwide. In Vietnam, independent fact-checkers, including New York, Vietnam News Agencies, or People Daily newspaper fact-checks sections, or the state-owned Ministry of Information and Communication. Yes, little is known about the effect independent fact-checking had on public trust is new, while Post-Covit can be found next week. If you have followed the developments of the COVID-19 situations in Vietnam, you will probably remember the case of Ho Chi Minh City, a typical case of the fourth wave of COVID-19 infections. Sorry, my connection. If you probably remember, yes, the typical spread of COVID-19 infections with the average number of new F0 cases per day increasingly more than 5 times next If you will be mentioned here that Ho Chi Minh City authorities launched a COVID-19 vaccination campaign for more than 30% of its population, despite all the efforts of city government to protect their citizens. Misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines causing health effects and female fertility appeared almost everywhere. Next, please. Issues, next, please. A small but urgent anti-vaccination people was Muslims against. They had shown a lot of links from many resources to prove that vaccines are completely ineffective and many people die from injection. Next, please. I sent some links from the Veterinary newspaper to prove the vaccine has been improved by the World Health Organization and its effectiveness for people in Western and Asian countries. For some people, it may work. Next, please. The fight against fake news and disinformation is not a capitalist thinking, but the effort to win back to those who deny the truth by skillfully verifying the truth with a trustworthy team of experts. It's been a long journey, especially in the post-truth areas, like the seeming analysis of chase of Chisa and an envelope. Both are against each other. Next, please. Sometimes the Chisa case the brave, and sometimes less escape. Next, please. The fight against news is proof such a journey that journalists have to keep working hard, even though we don't know where we will completely win. Next, please. It can be said that the social media revolution has changed and will continue to change journalism in the way of exploiting information and access results. With outstanding features of 24/7 connection and sharing regardless the geographical distance, language, genders, and country, social networks are becoming a technology product with strong influence and probability. In social media is considering a big old mind. Journalists and media must become the factories and post to own into gold. Next, please. With the Republic demand in the church, it seems the journalists hours have more important role to play critiquing political programs in the news story at the time of reporting. Next, please. We see lessons in our findings for independent fact checkers as well. Sorry, it's my connection. Fact checkers may help increasing the truth in news by more clearly start their fact checking a political specific claim rather than media coverage at constant. Some fact checkers make distinctions ready on their website but rarely on the average fact checker explanation. Next, please. Therefore, it's an opportunity for media to prove high quality and reliable. But also, the journalists will play the role to capture public orient and oriented information to increase stability in online community and in the society. Next, please. Next, please. Really, the social network platform plays a
Ms.
great impact to human.
Please finish your presentation in 20 seconds.
Okay. We are talking about the value of media shows restoration in both media professionals and citizens. In fact, the many printing media focus on developing the story of Netflix and investigation articles, and also they are focused on innovating features like postcards, SoundCloud to attract audience, especially the youth. The investment in social networks such as Vantage or Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and many video clips have also enhanced. Recently, the interactive journalism accepts itself the shift of public orienting, and in fact, Vietnam media have changed directly. We know about AI journalism and find next please, and find intelligence products next please. That the choice to find the different social media meet the sessions one false need to the public. Next please. In addition, it's necessary to have a code of conduct for journalists who are practiced in social societies that uphold the elections and the test of social network to participate in order to limit the freedom, and one in to uphold the freedoms of the organizations and individuals. Journalists and media managers need to provide themselves technical skills to deal with fake news, spam, also to handle sensitive information, copyright to contribute the positive value to society. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Now we're going to bring back Mr. Ranjit Kumar from India.
Yes, am I audible? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I start now. So at the very outset, I would like to thank the organizers of the World Journalist Conference for giving me an opportunity to speak before this august audience. From the views and experiences narrated by earlier speakers from every other country, it's very obvious that all the countries in the world are facing this problem of fake news. India, my country, is also not immune from this problem. India is facing serious problem of fake news in various media platforms, especially the social media platforms. With the advent of social media websites, vested interest groups have found it convenient to tarnish the image of rival or opposing groups or parties or nations. Fact-checking thus becomes very important responsibility of journalists and media houses around the world to prevent the further flow of such false news through their medium and make their readers or viewers aware of the society reality. In a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious and society like India, functioning in a democratic milieu, there exists deep divide and resultant one-upmanship among various groups and communities to establish their superiority and stake bigger claims over governance structures and limited economic resources. In this backdrop, there are attempts by vested groups to influence opinion and arouse passions. Public sentiments are aroused by popularizing narratives in favor of one and often critical and abusive to the rival groups. With the advent of new technology, new, faster, and more efficient means of delivering messages have been made possible. Fake news presented in a sensational manner sometimes gets viral. So it's very pertinent that fake news is checked at the very beginning of its release. In the present era of social media, individuals masquerading as unknown entities deliberately spread fake information to tarnish somebody's image or create disturbances in society. Political, social, and religious groups are becoming victims of rival parties or groups. Creators of fake messages often use old or related pictures or videos to incorporate them in current context and misguide gullible public. Such fake messages can easily be checked through Google fact check process. To check this menace, government information departments in India have set up their exclusive units or desks to have regular tracking of such fake messages. In India, under the Government Ministry of Information, there is a department called Press Information Bureau, which has a dedicated unit to keep a tab on fake news, especially relating to government programs or statements. The cyber cell of the police stations also have their fake checking units to keep a regular tab on fake news, especially rumors, which sensitizes general public to be aware of such false information, which has potential to create social disturbance. In India, fake news operators get more active in times of general elections. Fake narratives very often get planted in social media during or before parliament or assembly elections to misguide or influence the voters. Hence, headquarters of political parties also have such units to protect themselves from the impacts of such fake news released by opposing parties. Not only government departments, major newspapers and media outlets have also set up their own fake news checking desks. This helps them to increase the credibility among readers or viewers. In fact, managers of established or reputed companies lay a special emphasis on publishing correct, truthful news stories without giving them any color. I think it is the moral responsibility of such organized media outlets like newspapers, news websites, and television channels to check this menace and expose the persons or groups indulging in such attitudes with nefarious designs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Pune Padai from Iran.
Hello, dear all participants. Is my voice clear?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks to JAK for this precious invitation. Fact-checking or finding reliable sources in journalism is a main column for producing valuable news or report. Nowadays, that fake news has filled our life more than before. Every media has responsibility for fact-checking before publishing the content. In fact, unreliable contents, in the new media era, which contains professional media and social media, lots of unreliable contents are published in any second. In the case of social media, ordinary people define citizen reporter role for themselves and they publish contents based on entertainment or surprising subjects. Citizen reporters usually don't have a special education in the case of fact-checking, but they have important role for revealing sensitive objects to draw attention of the public opinion and governments. At the same time, the influencers can be used by professionals to lead public opinion into the planned area. In the case of professional media, the idea of fact-checking has been related to the power and money in all over the history. The policy of producing and publishing the right news is influenced by media, people, and governments. I do not want to point the crisis of fact-checking just with politics, but I believe it is related to all. The human society and its disasters is a production of all people. When some media don't try to check the facts or hide the reality, there is some strong reason that its roots goes to the public consciousness. I am aware that my sentences are close to philosophy and anthropology, but when we look at the origin of the crisis of fact-checking in media, it seems that there is no way other than flashbacking to the hidden desires of human, which is greed. Human wants to control the situation to feed his greed, to gain power and money. So if we flash back to the history of fact-checking in journalism, we find out lots of fake news which publish in order to guide public opinion to the desired targets. Now that we live in the pluralism world, we might be able to find solutions for producing the right news in the self-regulatory of each media. Any media which seeks its value has to find out new solutions to produce fact-based news. In the late pandemic situation, we are witnesses of floating human beings in the fake news. The truth is not clear for us yet because the system of power doesn't try to clear the mind of people. We journalists have the responsibility to check the fact of every word we publish. Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you have any question to any of the speakers today, please send us the question you have and to whom you want to ask that question. Next, Mr. Malik Sulemana, Senior Journalist at New Times Corporation in Ghana.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am happy to be here once again. My name is Malik Sulemana, a senior journalist with the Ghanaian Times in Accra. I first of all want to commend the Journalists Association of Korea for putting this august event together. This is the second year this program is running online. I hope to see you in person sometime next year. Today I want to talk about fact-checking journalism. And I must admit that this topic cannot be chosen or discussed at any better time. Thank you once again to the Journalists Association of Korea for making me one of the speakers for this year's World Journalists Conference. A lot has been said already, and so I do not intend to bother you with my long speech. So I will synthesize my speech and move to the concluding part. But most importantly, I must concede that in most advanced democracies, fact-checking is a big deal. Stories are subjected through the filter process of ensuring that whatever is fed to the public by way of information is accurate, truthful, objective, and credible. Now, fact-checking in Ghana is not something, that is considered by most media organizations. The only time stories are fact-checked is when the authenticity of a story or publication is called into question. And so I want to encourage journalists across the globe, I want to encourage media organizations that we owe our listeners and readers the duty of ensuring that whatever we put across on our various media organizations is truthful and credible. Because feeding fake news to the public is like serving a poison chalice. So I want to encourage my colleague journalists to help in shaping and building the democracy of our countries by ensuring that whatever we feed the public is credible and truthful. My speech will be shared with colleagues on the WhatsApp platform. And once again, I want to thank the Journalists Association of Korea for putting this together. I hope to see you all in person next year in the beautiful city of South Korea. And yes, of course, when I read, some names on the WhatsApp platform, I recall with nostalgia the first time we met in Korea in 2017. I have seen new names, and I want to meet you all in person to say hello, to hug you after a very long time when COVID wreaked havoc across the world, and it is still wreaking havoc across the world. Wherever you are, take good care of yourself. COVID is still out there. Over here in Ghana, only a handful of Ghanaians have taken the jabs, and I want to encourage colleagues that COVID is not over yet. The world has not found a cure for COVID-19, and so let's observe the COVID-19 safety protocols, to save our lives, those of our family and friends, and the rest of the world. I thank the Journalists Association of Korea for putting this together and hope to see you again sometime next year. Cheers and bye-bye from Accra.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Leonidio Ferreira from Portugal. Mr. Pereira, we cannot hear you.
Are you listening to me now?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, there was a problem with the microphone. Good morning from Lisbon. Greetings from Portugal to everybody, especially people in Korea who are organizing this conference. Thank you for all your effort for this incredible organization. My name is Leonidio Ferreira. I'm the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Diário de Notícias. It's the oldest Portuguese daily newspaper. It was founded in 1864. And among the best moments of our history, we can say that one of our former journalists was a Nobel Literature Prize, José Saramago, and among our front pages, historical front pages, there was the one exactly 48 years ago about the revolution, the Carnation Revolution, that brought democracy to Portugal and allows me to speak completely freely in my country and give you my experience as a journalist for more than 30 years, dealing especially with international news, but also as a deputy editor-in-chief controlling the news of other subjects. I would like to share you our preoccupation with fake news because this phenomenon coincides, at least in Western Europe, with the crisis in the newspapers, economic crisis. The internet was incredible to achieve a huge number of readers. Diário Notícias, that is based in Portugal, and we have only 10 million people. We have around 2 million different readers every month. And this is our historical record, because in the print edition, even in the best times, it was not more than 100,000 per day. But to get enough money to produce quality journalism nowadays is very difficult. And this is important when you have to keep a newsroom with different skills, with a different kind of journalists, and with different expertise, people who are able to identify possible fake news. Just talking about the last 10 years, and once again, concerning especially Portuguese history, we have to deal with economic crisis and a lot of unemployment until 2015. And at that moment, it was a huge quantity of fake news in the social media about everything connected with the economic crisis. More recently, the pandemics also affected us a lot. And even Portugal now is one of the countries with one of the best percentages of people already vaccinated. There was a very difficult time, January 2021, when our health system was really affected by a huge number of the people affected by COVID. And suddenly, even if the system was responding in the limit, there was a lot of fake news about crashes in the system, trying to create some kind of panic. And it was very important for the quality newspapers in print and online editions to fight against these wrong ideas, wrong information, and try to keep the population well informed, even in a very difficult situation. And now we have a war in the eastern part of Europe. Portugal has, curiously, Portugal has a huge community of Ukrainian people living in our country, very well integrated, also important community of Russian people. Then we are very aware of this war, and we have also some journalists there working for us and trying to cover the situation in the most great possible way. As a Portuguese newspaper, we depend a lot of international news agencies, and in some ways is a warranty of quality, because we know that they have very strong deontological procedures, but at the same time there is always the temptation to use information from the social media and information from from Ukraine directly. I'm giving this example of Ukraine, where in the just last days I found something like old images for other conflicts being used as to illustrate the news. Also video games images and this is something very dangerous because some of these images and even the video games images for non-qualified people will look like true. Returning to the way we deal
Ferreira,
with...
please finish your presentation in 20 seconds.
Well, we don't have a magic solution to deal with fake news. The best way is to have a common sense and just trust in some kind of sources. I have a rule for myself that is, in doubt, don't publish. We have to defend the credibility of a newspaper with more than 150 years. Then sometimes it's better to avoid to publicate and try to confirm than to be the quickest one and do a mistake. Mistakes are always very dangerous in journalism. Then in doubt, don't publish. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much, and congratulations again to the journalists of Korea. It's a country I already visited 3 times, and I have a great admiration from your country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, let's hear from Mr. An Hyung-jun, journalist at the Korean broadcaster MBC.
Nice to meet you. I look forward to seeing you next year in Seoul. 한국의 팩트체크 현황과 언론 자율 규제 기구 추진에 대해서
the current
시기별로
status in
말씀을
Korea by
드려보겠습니다.
period in terms of the self-regulatory organization in Korea.
먼저 2016년까지는
Until
공영방송 등 일부
2016,
레거시
some of the
미디어들이
legacy medias, including the public
자체적인
broadcasters,
팩트체크 팀을
operated
운영해왔습니다.
their own embedded fact-check teams. In 2007, there was a big change, so fact-check specialized media and platform launched in 2017. And since the fall of 2016, the Candlelight Revolution, a movement for the resignation of the president, has been held in Seoul. And in the process, the demand for fact-checking for fake news has increased. In March 2017, the SNU Fact Check Center and then New Stuff were born. So New Stuff means news true or false. So it was opened in 2017, and it is like a fact-check portal site that gathers and evaluates all of the fact-checking articles. So it opened in March 2017. But this belongs to the Department of Journalism and Information Sciences at SNU, so this place does not directly fact-check all the articles. So in June, we newly launched the New Stuff. So 4 journalists started to work full-time offline, and about 50 experts in each field were active as advisors online. So we selected and uploaded 2 or 3 news fact-check results every week. And since then, while gaining trust, we also carried out a large-scale project to meet the commitment of the president. In 2018, we hosted the fact-checking contest, participated the citizens. So it was the world's first fact-checking contest to screen out fake news. And it was led by the Broadcasting Journalists Association, and the youth who dream of being journalists and ordinary citizens and high school and middle school students participated. And in the second competition in 2019, also participated in Google Summit in Singapore by the end of that year and gave a presentation about the fact-checking process. And one of the members is now working as a journalist. In 2020, FactCheckNet was launched. The Korea Journalists Association and Broadcasting Journalists Association launched this FactCheckNet, and citizens and experts who have completed the fact-check training courses joined together. And more than 200,000 citizens have used the FactCheckNet in just over a year since the website was open, and the Korea Communication Commissions also conducted some of the programs like the Media Literacy Education Program, but the government budget support for these organizations has been reduced, unfortunately. Now, you can see the activation of the fact-check team, but also the limitation inside the journalism companies. In 2020, the Korean broadcaster JTBC newsroom became a member of the IFCN, and also other journalism are now operating their own fact-checking team, such as 한겨레 or 3 broadcasters and YTN and etc. So all in together, 30 medias altogether. So they are now playing a very important role to report the accurate articles. But now it is criticized and accused of selection bias. In 2021, we started to promote the establishment of a media self-regulatory organization. So 7 organizations, including the Korea Broadcasting Journalists Association, the National Press Workers Union, the KJA, and the Korea Internet Newspaper Association, are now pushing this work together. So this is a plan to let media companies pay their share and participate while observing the rules. And it must be done. And then the key is the self-regulatory committee. It consists of 9 experts recommended by the External Recommendation Committee, and they monitor the they monitor the news and article like in the form of the ombudsperson. And then there are other self-regulators and monitoring teams that are in operation separately. And significant violation of the codes are subject to fines, as well as recommendations, cautions, and warnings. And then correction of articles and apology can also be imposed on such violations. But on the other hand, news outlets that have complied with the contributions are reduced. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your valuable opinions and insights today. Now we are moving on to the Q&A session. We are running out of time, so please make your response brief, no longer than 1 minute. So the first question we have is for Ms. Nyong. Here's the question. Do you view social media as a threat to credible journalism?
네, for the question, I believe the question was also has to do with what Rosalind said. It's a blessing, but also a curse. Let's talk about the Zoom interview. If we didn't have that during the quarantine time, how would we have interviewed people suffering from the COVID-19? Now, the problem is that social media and how we handle the social media. Well, we cannot say that social media is an evil. Any media, in fact. Tobias from Germany mentioned that there is fake news around the Ukraine war. And just do a few rounds of the Googling. There are many things that you can fact check just by doing that. But now, many journalists around the world are not trained, or maybe they are trained pretty well, so about how to identify the fact check. So you need to understand the level of understanding. Now, some of you mentioned that in the newsroom, that the fact checking must be a rule, and our journalists will have to be properly trained. Now, if necessary, I believe we can have a procedure or maybe a unit within an organization to do the fact check on the social media. I hope that answered the question.
We have another question for Ms. Nyong. Let me read the question. I think a problem with the fact-checking comes from the lack of Freedom of Information Act. Your response?
Yeah.
Thank you again for the question. I think when it comes to the public source of the official sources, there are many cases that it's shunned. As you all know, during the research process of the fact-checking, the first thing to do is that the speaker will have to verify the veracity. So the reliability or the liability falls upon the speaker itself. Now, the source shuns away from it though. Now in Korea, we do have a law called Official Disclosure Act. Now, according to that particular law, the journalists and reporters will have to go through a certain procedures to ask for the official sources to be disclosed. But a lot of times the sources do not disclose the information and they shun away from it and they actually intentionally take time and delay the process. And in some cases, Excel spreadsheets, when they are disclosed, you can easily get the statistics right away. However, there are certain people, the group of people who provide it in PDF intentionally so that it cannot be easily seen. So a lot of the people in Korea, journalists in particular, that are wishing to fact check, have argued that transparency is a big problem. And so a lot of data will have to be on the record and publicly disclosed. So transparency is one thing that must be adhered to make sure that we can do the proper fact-checking. And that will have to be done from the pressure from the society in general and also for journalism themselves. So I think that's one thing that I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Our third question is for Mr. Muhammad Tawfiq Ali. Here's the question. There are many organizations that have been working for fact-checking. How do your organization has been working, and how can journalists like us can benefit from it?
Of course, on the question of, thank you for the question. On the question of benefiting from the organizations working on fact-checking, depends on collaborative efforts. We should collaborate with each other, either as individual professionals or on organizational level. On how they have been working, up till now, it's been an uphill task on part of the fact-checking organizations to operate on a desired level of unearthing the facts and truths. It requires, it's understandable, it requires independence, resources, and it is on that counts that certain challenges arise because both independence and resources are limited and precious. So to my understanding, the more we can generate, mobilize collaboration, government to government, government to private, private to private, we probably will be able to achieve a desired level of success. And also through the exchanges of experiences, mutual experiences between and among the individual professionals and institutions. Thank you once again for the question.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mr. Habib Tomi. Here's the question. It is very important to allow fact-checkers to work freely, but not every government allows them to do so. So your response?
That's true. It's not only just the government, it's also money, capitals, big names, big companies. So let's not blame only the government. Many stakeholders refuse fact-checking. That's why people, fact-checkers, real ones, genuine ones, should work together to make sure they can have access, direct access to the people. Let's not forget that it's like a football match. You're going to play, it's a game, you're going to win. You're not going to say, let's settle for a draw. So fact checkers face huge tasks. And they don't have to deal only with the government, but also with big companies, with very big names, politicians, lots of people and lots of stakeholders. So by uniting, by working together, fact checkers can overcome these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to have one more question before the break, and the rest of the questions will be addressed during the discussion session. So the next question is for Ms. Margaret Ohalbo. So how do you see the recent efforts of the government in various countries making laws and regulations to control freedom?
Thank you. Well, governments try to regulate is seen as a political action. The response of media, opinion leaders, and the community is, okay, this is political, what they are looking for. And many countries those days are, we could say, divided right, left, opposition, okay, government, opposition. So government, I think, is maybe not the right way. The way is the media, the journalists, the experts, the unions that have to work articulated to find the right path to work on these control regulations and checks or checker. We have to give guidance to the audience. We have to educate, and the academy must be part of this. Journalists, at the moment they begin studying at the academy, at the college, they must understand the importance of this regulatory system and the options that we always, as a journalist, give always to the audience through the stories, real stories, not fake stories, and have the option to understand what is fake. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we are going to play a promotion video for the Seoul Tourism Organization. After watching the video and taking a short break, we will have a discussion session at 5:10. If you have any question to anyone, please leave your name, nationality, and to whom you want to ask that question. Enjoy the video.
서울관광재단 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매해 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광 도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단, 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매해 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단, 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매해 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단, 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매일 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월, 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단, 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매일 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월, 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다. 서울관광재단, 알고 계세요? 방탄소년단 영상으로 전 세계 서울을 핫하게 알린 혹시 거기냐고요? 네, 맞습니다. 매일 겨울 서울의 밤을 아름답게 장식했던 서울 비추렁 축제부터 공항과 시내 곳곳 26개 관광 안내소까지 서울관광재단은 알고 보면 시민 여러분과 꽤 가까이 있었습니다. 2019년 서울을 방문한 외래 관광객은 무려 1,400만 명. 서울관광재단은 서울관광 전담 조직으로서 외래 관광객 유치를 위해 노력해왔어요. 그 결과 서울은 그야말로 전 세계가 사랑하는 글로벌 관광도시가 되었습니다. 한 명의 관광객이 오면 먹고, 만나고, 즐기며 우리 경제에 긍정적인 영향을 준답니다. 이런 관광객이 1,400만이 되면 그 효과는 정말 어마어마하죠. 세계 곳곳에 서울이 가진 멋과 매력을 알리고 서울을 찾은 방문객들이 서울을 제대로 만끽할 수 있도록 서비스, 축제, 이벤트 기획부터 마이스, 글로벌 마케팅까지 서울관광재단은 누구나 즐길 수 있는 서울을 쉼없이 만들어 나가고 있습니다. 외국인뿐 아니라 누구나 일상 속에서 차별 없이 서울을 여행할 수 있도록 다양한 생활 관광 프로그램을 운영하고 관광업계, 스타트업과 힘을 합쳐 더 나은 서울 관광을 만들어가기 위해 노력하고 있어요. 그리고 2021년 4월, 새로운 서울, 새로운 관광을 위해 서울 관광플라자를 개관했어요. 이제 우리는 관광업계, 그리고 시민 여러분과 더 가까이 함께하려고 합니다. 서울을 방문하는 관광객뿐 아니라 서울 시민, 그리고 관광을 둘러싼 모든 이들이 행복할 수 있는 도시, 여행하고 싶고 살고 싶은 행복한 관광도시 서울, 서울관광재단이 함께합니다.
이 질문 둘 다. We will now begin a discussion session. If you wish to speak, please leave your name and nationality in the chat box. I will invite you to speak on a first-come, first-served basis. Please press the unmute button before you speak. Before our discussion, we're going to talk about two remaining questions. The first question comes from Ms. Sofal. Here's the question. The war is going on between Russia and Ukraine, and some countries have closed Russian news channels while social media networks have been doing the same. So how can we balance news and information, and how can we check and verify news and information about the war and the Russian side especially? Your response? The question is for Ms. J. Alex.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear my name earlier. Well, first of all, there are still journalists from around the world in Russia, and we frequently see reports actually from inside Russia, talking to people on the street. So, and all levels of society. So we do get a balance there. And I think that's it. I mean, you have to leave it in the hands of the journalists to go out and do the interviews and find sources and get a variety of viewpoints. And we do see that all the time. I see that on many different channels here, on CNN, on the BBC, and others.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nasir Ajaz, would you respond to the same question?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please
Yeah.
go on.
Any question?
Yeah, the same question. The war is going on between Russia and Ukraine, and some countries have closed Russian news channels, while social media networks have been doing the same. So how can we balance news and information, and how can we check and verify news and information about the Russian side and the war?
Okay, let me say that in Pakistan, no Russian channel has been blocked by the government or any government authority. As far as the social media is concerned, yes, the people are very much free to express their views for and against. So this is going on. And as in my presentation, I stated that there's no mechanism or no such system for fact checking in Pakistan. So we have to develop. We have yet to develop this system. Just no check, no balance, no check and balance here. We are going, as I told you that already the situation is very grave in Pakistan because after the ouster of Prime Minister Imran Khan, the political parties, rival political parties have launched a campaign against each other. So this is going on, including those allegations leveled by Imran Khan against America. And he also started saying that he has been made target by the America because he sided in Pakistan, and we have check it. Thank you very much.
Thank
Hello.
you. Thank you. Sorry about the internet connection problem. Now we have another question from Ms. Rosalind Garganera. This question is for Mr. Nasir Arjaz. So
yes, please.
So how do you think our situation in which a lot of fake news are coming out to destroy their political opponents during their election campaigns?
Of course, the people should check. That's why the fact-checking check is coming in. They have to not to believe easily in the news. They have to double check it, try 3 times a check, 3 times checking it, or to validate the information or to validate the news. So the people have their own responsibilities also. They don't rely on the journalists. They have to check on their own, so they can see if the news is reliable or correct. They should have rely on the reporters or the journalists. They should check on their own also, do their fact checking too, before they believe. Yes, nowadays in our country, in the Philippines, it's a huge or rampant fake news because of the election. They're destroying each other for the position. So we Filipinos, some Filipinos now in this age, the 20th century, are not easily believe in those news. They are checking now, especially the younger ones, the youth, the ones who knows how to check, because we have a lot of organization and groups who have this fact-checking fact-checking activities for them to help the people. Yes, that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Nasir Arjaz, would you respond to the issue brought up by Miss Rosalind? The situation where politicians used fake news to destroy their political opponents.
Actually, people, the citizens, they are the best judges. I can refer to one video clip. It was circulated by Imran Khan. And in that video clip, it was shown that the Pakistani TV is telecasting the news about the ouster of Imran Khan, and American president and one of his colleagues, they were expressing their happiness over it. So that was a fake video circulated on the social media around the world, and people were well aware that it is a fake video, and they rejected it. So people are the best judges. They can see, they can watch, they can judge what is wrong, what is correct, what is authentic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tawfiq Ali, would you share your thoughts on any of the topics brought up today? We cannot hear you. Would you press the unmute button?
Oh, yes, Mr. Moderator, I hope now you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
You can, right?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you once again for giving me an opportunity to add a few more points. Actually, I was wondering as to what just Mr. Nasir Aizaz just mentioned about leaving certain things and questions with the people in general as judges to judge and make assessment about the facts and truths. I would like to fully agree with his observation, but with a condition, which is very important in my view. People have to be made aware, educated. They have to be enabled with certain basic literacy. Literacy of digital world, as we say, digital literacy. In certain countries, particularly in our region, South Asia, Southeast Asia, but again, particularly in South Asia, the reality and context of and the level of digital literacy among the general people is not yet something encouraging. I think, and for quite a while I have observed that this is a critical area. This is, I repeat, this is a very critical area that needs immediate intervention, either by the national governments or by non-government organizations or by international organizations to raise the level of digital literacy among the general people so they can discern, they can critically look at whatever is happening on the virtual space, in the digital world, and how they should behave, how they should look at any information that is flowing freely to them every instant, every moment. So for the people to be able to make a judgment and assessment about the facts and truths of any event or any information, first and foremost, they have to be capable. So we should look into this necessity of making our people in general, people at large, able, enabled, capable of making judgment and seeing through any information or any event critically. Having said that, I would like to add a few more points. I'd like to share a few more points on how generally, as general standards, how we should look at the entire process and the entire effort of fact-checking exercise. I hope most of us are aware, I think all of us are aware in general, of an organization, International Fact-Checking Network, that have been quite active for quite a while in recent years, that has around 200 fact-checking outlets on its network, operating in more than 60 countries, and 82 fact-checking organizations from 58 countries until 2020 signed onto a general agreement of fundamental principles known as Principle Code of Fact-Checking Process. This code of principles includes basically 5 principles that are mostly generally agreed upon by organizations and entities as the basic fundamental basis for pursuing the fact-checking exercise. Number 1 principle is, as most of us are or may be aware, non-partisanship and fairness. So fact-checking by applying the uniform standard for every fact check, follow the same process, and letting the evidence dictate the conclusions. So that is principle one that we may keep in mind while thinking of having and running and operating a self-regulatory process mechanism for fact-checking, either at local level or at regional level. The second principle generally agreed upon is transparency of sources. So all sources in enough details should be offered so the readers are able to verify fact-check findings themselves if they need to. The third principle that we may have some attention to in the process of exercising the fact-checking process is the transparency of funding and organization. So transparency of funding sources and transparency of the organization itself should be accountable, again, as usually it is, accountability to the people in general in a transparent way. So transparency of the fact checkers' funding sources with an effort funding from other organizations have no influence over the conclusions drawn upon in the process of any particular fact-checking engagement. So, so this should be shared and made public through reports and shared with the people and the targeted audience who are the beneficiaries, the audience who are affected by the activities of a particular organization, fact-checking organization. So readers can communicate with the checkers if they need to, if they wish to. The fourth principle that we may take into account is the transparency of methodology. So the method we may apply in fact-checking process should be, again, transparent. Fact-checking methodology of selection, research, writing, editing, publishing, and correction should be adequately explained, lucidly, and should be made available for the public if they're interested, for scrutiny, for examination, to have a look of their own. And the last principle that we may pay attention to, that we may take into account in this process of fact-checking is the openness and the honesty of correction. So if there is an error, unwitting or unintended or procedural, if there is an error in the process of fact-checking, so the correction should be done clearly, and the policy should be how the correction has been done. That policy should be made public for public consumption. To my understanding, these fundamental principles are should be facilitating the transparency and the strength of any aspiring fact-checking organization that is upcoming or that is being thought of, or we may think of anywhere in our local context or regional context. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Ms. Pavieta Davidova from Bulgaria. Would you share your thoughts with us today? Any of the topics brought up today?
Hello from Bulgaria. My name is Pavieta Davidova. I hope you hear me.
Yes, we can.
I'm a journalist in Doma Daily, and since 2 years ago, I became a member of the Bulgarian Journalist Union. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to share thoughts of such an experienced journalist like all of you. I don't think I could explain the fact-checking. We all know how are the main ways it works, and probably everything is connected with the self-esteem of the person and the responsibility of the journalist. Because as a journalist, I want my articles to be correct. That's why we all are doing self-checking by ourselves. Probably the problem is that most people don't do this, especially for the youngers. It's easier just I saw it somewhere on the internet, so it's correct, and don't check it. Every media is trying to correct its own information and to check it and to provide everything the way it should be written or implemented. But what happens if you are trying to be fast and you don't check everything the way it should be? I like the idea, some of you already mentioned it, we should teach people how to check themselves. But I don't know, in Bulgaria we have problem. We don't have that whole body that is checking everything. There are different NGOs or medias are trying to check information, but it's always like a flow. They have directions or specific things they are checking, but not everything is clear. I mean, different NGOs are concerned in taking part. They are not that. I'm sorry, I lost my mind. But is there a way to make a national pact or something for NGOs and governmental probably or state organizations who check informations or something like this? And I'm just asking questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. So, Ms. Chong Nyong, would you like to share your thoughts on any of the ideas or topics brought up today? After her response, we will wrap it up for today. If there are no more participants willing to speak, share your thoughts.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to actually virtually meet the journalists around the world, and I can see that everybody here is fighting the fake journalism, fake news, and that sometimes there is a risk of the mainstream journalism to be bought into or misled by the fake news. And fighting, under the name of the fighting fake news, there's also a danger of using a legislation or regulation to infringe upon the self-expression, freedom of media. So that's why we talked about the self-regulating organization or the mechanisms. And listening to all of you, I think the main important point of it is the finding facts or pursuing the truth. All the journalists here, we understand that the first principle of what we do is the accuracy. And we all agree upon the importance of it. And I think we need to be reminded of the importance of accuracy, especially in the era of post-truth. Now, we all know that the finding or pursuing truth is the very basic principle of journalism, but at the same time, this is also an area with the greatest level of confusion. So what we can do is we can enhance the level of accuracy, enhance the level of fact-checking. That's what we need to do. We need to strengthen them and hold a stronger yardstick. We talked about the importance of enhancing the media literacy of the public, and I think for that we need to really create the best practices, examples of that, what you just mentioned. So journalists need to start from there. Only then the media literacy of the people, of the general people, will also enhance alongside. We talked about the fairness of the international fact-checking as the number-one principle of the International Fact-Checking Organization. Now, I understand that non-partisanship and non-partisanship is extremely critical, so I would like to echo that point. Thank you very much, everyone, for your inputs. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, Mr. Kuban Tavaldiev would like to speak about fact-checking in civil society.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will be very shortly speak about fact-checking problems with government officials who is controlling this. In Kyrgyzstan, for instance, we have a couple of thousand, maybe thousand NGOs who is working and watching how the officials work. Unfortunately, not all levels of governing in Kyrgyzstan working openly. So I think in other countries also very important to follow democratic principles, to share all information we have to the common society. That's very important at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We thank you all for your passion and participation today. For tomorrow, we will talk about the impact of journalism on societies around the world under the title of A Society Changed by Journalism. Before you leave, we will have a photo session. So all participants, please look at the screen and wave your hands.
One more, please. Thank you.
So that's all we have for the first day of the World Journalist Conference. See you tomorrow, and thank you.
Thank you all.